My name is Linda Vacan, and I'm the Chair of the Ordinance Committee, and I'd like to call this meeting to order, this being Tuesday, April 25th at 6:35. I'm in the council chambers with Councilor Givner and Councilor Jose Maldonado Velez. On Zoom, our committee members, Councilor Kevin Jourdain and Councilor Israel Rivera, are also in attendance. So because we are hybrid tonight, I'll ask Councilor to read in the order to put us in proper business.
So a motion to take a roll call vote that for the purposes of this meeting would be applicable to all motions to suspend the rules, remove an item from the table, place items on the table, package items together, or open a public hearing unless there is an objection.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
So all in favor, Councilor Givner?
Yes.
Councilor Vacan, yes. Councilor Maldonado Velez?
Yes.
Councilor Jourdain?
Yes.
Councilor Rivera?
Yes.
Thank you. So we're properly opened and we're properly in the rules. For item 1, I would like to entertain a motion to open the public hearing to continue it to August at the request of the applicant.
Oh, that's item 1.
Item 1.
Motion to open the, or to extend the public
we have to
hearing.
open it,
Oh,
yeah.
To open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So item 1 is a public hearing for a special permit application for Small Wonders LLC at 109 Lyman Street for a marijuana manufacturing establishment. And at the request of the applicant, they've requested this to be continued to August. Hang on. We will momentarily. Now, if we go in our regular order of dates, we would set the meeting for August 22nd. Now, that is, during our recess, and we have the one meeting of the council in August, but if that works for committee members, we could do that. Councilor Rivera, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you for recognizing me. Is there a reason for the postponement to August? Because as I'm looking at the agenda, it looks like it's been continued from 12/13, 1/24, 2/28. It's already been continued like 4 different times.
So,
Is there a reason?
well, I'm speculating a bit, but this is the application where there was a change in ownership, and we asked them to provide us with the provisional license from the State Cannabis Commission. And so they may be waiting for that.
So there's no update at all as to why they want an extension? They just asked for an extension?
Yes, this came to me from Jeffrey today, I believe.
But there's no explanation at all?
No, it was just a request.
All right.
They said that there's
This-
some things still up in the air.
I'm sorry?
They said there are some things still up in the air.
No, I hear that, Jeff, and I hear the postponing and all that, but it would be good for them to at least send a communication, like outlining or giving us an update, because we've already postponed it a couple times, and then now they want us to postpone it for another 6 months, which is, I'm totally okay with it, but it's just, where are we at? What's the status? We postponed it for another 6 months, and then who's to say they don't come back and say we need another 3 months?
Okay.
I guess
so-
that's the thing for me.
Okay, I think that's a fair question, and we can entertain a motion to continue the public hearing to August and request a status update from the applicant through our administrative assistant. Okay, Jeffrey?
So moved.
Will do.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. So then the motion would be to continue the public hearing to August 22nd at 6:30 and request an update from the applicant. All in favor? Counselor Givner?
Yes.
Counselor Maldonado Velez?
Yes.
Counselor Jourdain?
Yes.
Counselor Rivera?
Yes.
Counselor Vacan, yes. Okay, so it's continued to August 22nd at 6:30. Okay, now, our next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items are joint with the planning board, who's not here yet. So if there's a particular item that somebody would like to take up, we can do
Madam
that.
Chair?
Yes, Jeffrey?
Just as a little update, I've been communicating with Sharon, and I guess they're trying to figure out if they have a quorum on their end.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll stand by and we'll go out of order until we know. Okay?
Just making sure,
I make
So-
a motion to suspend the rules to go to item 7.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There's a question from the public. So in a public hearing, they're wondering when they can speak to the committee. So when we open a public hearing, there's a opportunity for anybody from the public to speak on the matter. If somebody wishes to speak on an item that is not a public hearing, they can put a request forth and the committee votes, and usually the committee will vote to hear something that somebody would like to bring to our attention. But as a general matter, that's how it happens, and I would ask for comments from the public. No, that's fine. That's great.
Well, you were talking about what is it, what business is it again?
Small wonders.
Yeah, small ones. If they postponed it 4 times, and, is it really like, how much money are we actually gonna make having another marijuana industry?
Well, that we will take up when we get to the hearing.
4 times without giving a reason, why don't we give them a shorter, delay and to get a reason for postponing?
Well, we did request that.
Well, we're requesting that now, so we'll see what happens. Okay, so item 7, which is properly before us, is filed by Counselor Givner, that the city post a snow parking restriction on its website at least 12 hours before towing begins. In other words, towing will not begin until the restriction has been up on the website at least 12 hours. Now, we have a communication, I'm not sure, hang on, we're jumping around now, so I have to dig in my pile. Okay. So we've received a communication from Carl Rossi, our director of our DPW. And he notes in his communication that on March 20th, the Board of Public Works himself and the Holyoke Police Department Captain Cruz discussed storm and roadway maintenance parking restrictions enforcement. It was agreed that more advance notice is better to provide HPD a bigger time frame to ticket and tow. Notice of parking restrictions also needs to consider HPD change of shifts, and in advance of the next snow season, we will meet to finalize plans. At the Board of Public Works meeting on April 3rd, the procedure for parking restrictions during snow emergencies was discussed. It was determined that the best course of action is to coordinate with the police department well ahead of the snow emergency to determine the best time to implement a parking ban. Taking into consideration the timing of the snowstorm, police shift changes, and the time of day so residents can follow the parking ban. When implementing the reverse parking ban, it would be determined by the time the snowstorm ends, completion of the plowing operations on the side of the initial parking ban, manpower availability, and the factors listed above. In both situations, the Department of Public Works will do their best to give the public 12 hours advance notice of a parking ban. Sincerely, Carl Rossi, Director. So it sounds like they're in process. Yeah, and so Counselor Givner, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, this came up because during snowstorms, community members reached out and mentioned that, you know, because of like the length of people's work hours, or, you know, if the parking ban comes out in the middle of the day for 6 p.m. and they're working overnight, or for whatever, you know, having 12 hours is helpful because some people work 12-hour shifts, and, you know, having that time they can plan ahead. So I think any effort to work towards that, considering that that hasn't been the case, is helpful. So unless anybody has discussion on this, I would make a motion that this is complied with.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands. Oh, Council Rivera.
I think I agree with Councilor Givner. I think the only thing I would bring up, which kind of coincides with this, has to do with the fact that like every time through the year, like they stay with that odd street parking or the side even street parking, and for not all residents, obviously, but for there's a chosen few of residents that live on tighter streets, and that only one time is like odd for the whole year makes it way more difficult for some residents. So that I have a variety of residents that are reaching out to me to see if there's another way to see if where you could do odd and even and odd and switch it up. So that way, with regards to parking around the snowstorms, it makes it easier for them, especially the ones that live on smaller, tighter streets. But I guess this will be a different order or a phone call to the DPW department. Just wanted to put that out there.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion that the order has been complied with. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Counselor Givner?
Yes.
Counselor Maldonado Velez?
Yes.
Counselor Jordan?
Yes.
Counselor Rivera?
Yes.
And Counselor Bacon, yes. So 5-0 vote, that order has been found to be complied with. Okay. Is
Motion
there-
to take up item 8.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Item 8 is filed by me to add add to the no parking signs on Cherry Street that vehicles will be towed at owner's expense. And we have feedback from our engineer who'd been reviewing this for a while. So we were waiting for him. And he has noted in his memo dated April 22nd that he has no objection to this order and the directive may be made to the DPW for installation. So I would request to my colleagues that you recommend approval of this so that we can bring it to the council.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Counselor Givner?
Yes.
Counselor Maldonado Velez?
Yes.
Counselor Jordan?
Yes.
Counselor Rivera?
Yes.
Counselor Bacon, yes. So that will be recommended for adoption by a 5-0 vote. Thank you all very much. Want to do,
I want a motion to take up item 9.
is there a second?
Second.
Yes, second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Item 9 by Counselor Givner, ordered that the no parking sign be removed on one side of the curve at O'Connor Ave Bend to add parking while keeping the corners safe and passable for service and emergency vehicles. So it's in your packet, it should be under 8, and it has 8, 9, 14 through 16 on the top of it, so it's a little hard to
Okay.
pick out. I'm just giving people a minute to read through the memo if they haven't had a chance to.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I don't know. I feel we're just speaking. With the parking signs, are we considering why people keep parking there? Because I live in the area. I walk past that every single day. They don't seem to have much parking for themselves or guests.
So we're kind of past debate or discussion in this regard, but I'm happy to talk to you offline about it after. How's that? So,
So it sounds like the recommendation is not to change it.
right, I guess there was a concern about the fire trucks being able to get through.
Madam, may I be recognized?
Counselor Givner, by all means.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I had put in this order because after, so I realized that it was no parking areas were created in that corner to allow for the like trash trucks and fire and ambulances to get through because it was really tight in that corner. Recently, residents had asked if one side could be opened up for parking because we do have limited parking on O'Connor Avenue. So I requested that it be restudied, basically. So if the recommendation is against it, I understand, but I just wanted to reach out and see if it was possible or reasonable to make that change, even though it's already been changed. So
Okay, all right. So then I guess, I don't see any other hands. I guess the motion could be to accept the recommendation of the engineer.
yeah, so motion is to accept that recommendation and that the order be complied with.
Second.
All in favor? Counselor Givner?
Yes.
Counselor Maldonado Velez?
Yes.
Counselor Jordan?
Yes.
Counselor Rivera? Counselor Rivera? Counselor
Yes.
Bacon? Yes. Thank you. So 5-0, accept engineer's recommendation to keep the signs. Okay.
A motion to take up item 10?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Filed by Counselor Jordan, that Division 2 of our ordinances be amended to require the mayor and the personnel department create and implement a job evaluation system for city employees so that all employees receive goals, standards of performance, and a thoughtful annual evaluation against those standards. Ordinance 2-312 currently requires the personnel administrator to maintain the job evaluation system. Problem is, no such system actually exists to be maintained. The new ordinance should be designed to require the existence of the system, but management will be allowed the flexibility to draft it according to their needs and professional opinion. It is unacceptable that for too long, such a system that is so necessary for all workplaces our size still does not exist in our city government. Absent the city council requiring such a system, it is almost certain that no such system will come into existence independent of us, or it would have by now. There is no current objective measurement of employee performance that rewards high-quality employees and holds poor-quality employees accountable. Management in the city needs to take action as soon as possible. Counselor Jordan, do you wish to?
Yes. I would like to have a brief but meaningful amendment to the current ordinance so that it actually requires there to be a system. The problem we have is a bit of a loophole currently, which is saying that the personnel administrator will maintain the system, but it doesn't actually compel them to actually have a system.
Okay.
And guess what? We don't. Citizens find it remarkable when I talk to them about the fact that we have no performance appraisal system for employees. To think how many hundreds into the thousands of employees, and there is no formal evaluation process in any of these departments. And then one has to wonder, how is it that there's ever goal setting? How is it you could ever hold people accountable when you think about the world of documentation? If you were actually going to discipline someone, these things should all be part of this employee appraisal system. Hopefully, by us requiring such a system, we can bring the city into the 21st century. Now, this is all so loosey-goosey. It has been for years. And, I think some of us who've been here a little bit are probably just kind of hoped that management would do it, but it never actually got done. We've heard good things, and we've been told in the past, yeah, we're working on it, but we actually have to have an ordinance in place that actually requires a system. On the other hand, I had a nice conversation with the mayor, and he's fully supportive. And I want to write this in a way that leaves it rather vanilla, in that they have the flexibility to develop the system that they think, and I would hope that they would propose something to us. And he's on board of doing it. I know he wants to start, I believe, with the Section A employees, the non-union employees. There's a provision in the professional supervisors agreement, which allows for there to be an evaluation of those employees. So I think the goal is to start there and to branch out. And hopefully, again, we can get to a system where we're rewarding good employees, we're recognizing good employees, and we're holding not so good employees accountable and documenting. And the bigger thing is, if you have no appraisal system, one, you have no objective standards, which means you are inviting a lack of uniformity, a lack of fairness, a lack of common standards. And number two is you have no goal setting, which if you have no goals, guess what? You will achieve no goals. Other than that, it's all handshake and informal. We need to step up our game here big time and run this place in a lot more professional manner. So this is a step in the right direction, and I certainly encourage the mayor and Kelly Curran to take the ball from here and to roll this out and shape this in a meaningful way as to what this system could be. This simply requires that they actually do something. So I'm interested in what other people's thoughts are and moving forward with this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council Rivera, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with this piece. I think for me though, it's a little more difficult to understand because is this for like all city employees? Because if it is for all city employees, then it's like, then that means police, fire, any other departments would have to abide by the same amendment across the board. And to my understanding, they have their own union systems or whatnot. But if not, then they would have to abide by it. That's cool with me too. But I think one of the things that stands out to me is the order I filed about the traffic team, right? And how that is law and that is supposed to be compel the chief to actually have that traffic squad, but they've never actually had it. So like, it's cool to have these policies in place, but like, if nobody's gonna follow up to make sure that they're actually being followed, then, I mean, I'm with it. I agree with it 110%, but I just hope that policies are followed after they're put into place, because it kind of seems like that's not the practice across the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Councilor Jordan.
Yeah, I'd like to answer Councilor Rivera's good question, which is, he makes the point, is the goal of this to apply to everyone? Absolutely. However, I do recognize Rome was not built in a day. And so I'm told that, they need to implement this with the various unions, but I think the goal is to get a system, to begin to implement it with the people that already they have the authority to implement it with, and to ultimately implement this into all the employees, which makes all the sense in the world. It's certainly my intent. Every employee should be getting evaluated. That is helpful to employees. Management should want to do that. So what's the alternative? You don't get evaluated and it's all, pat people on the back and a handshake. That's totally unacceptable. And what we have now is no system. It's total chaos. And so, yes, that is absolutely my objective. Police, fire, DPW, you name it, everybody. As far as the other point he makes about the traffic bureau, he's right. We used to have a traffic bureau. We have an ordinance that requires there to be a traffic bureau. And as far as when people stop following ordinances, when these things come to our attention, then we should call them out and bring them in for a hearing when people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. And we also have the power of the purse. And that's the ultimate for non-compliance, right? Okay, we're not going to fund you then if you don't follow the rules. So that's another mechanism. But Council Rivera and I can talk offline about that, but I did want to just assure him, yes, the objective here is for everybody.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. I would just like to note that we've been joined by Counselor Puello and Counselor Tessa Murphy-Ramboletti on Zoom, and also Counselor Jenny Rivera. And we have Attorney Kathleen Degnan on Zoom as well. Thank you. So there is a department head who'd like to be recognized by the committee, Kelly Curran, who's our head of personnel. So is the committee
Yes.
amenable?
I'll make a motion to allow the personnel administrator to speak and to help us.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Kelly Curran, welcome, and I see your hand is up, so you have the floor.
Thank you. I just wanted to answer Counselor Rivera's questions, but I think Counselor Jordan did a good job. And I do support creating an evaluation system. I think it's well needed and overdue. The PSA is currently the only union that has something in their bargaining agreement. So the mayor and I spoke about it, and we like how there's benchmarks and goals, department and citywide. So we're gonna try to mirror it, but update it a little bit more and roll out with Schedule A. Schedule A folks fall under ordinance, so it's easier to do that. The other units or unions will have to be bargained, and we just finished settling with quite a few of them this year, so we'll have to wait to the next round unless we create MOAs. But like Councilor Jordan said, we can't build Rome in one day, so we're gonna start off slowly, and I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you very much. So Counselor
Could I ask a
Jordan?
question of Kelly?
Yes, through the chair,
Hello?
Counselor Jordan, your question is?
Kelly, the objective here this evening is simply to create maybe a 2-sentence ordinance that basically just says, we're gonna have a system that, we have to have a system. But could you, when you feel prepared, you and the mayor, could you at some point draft up whatever the plan is and submit that to the city council of how you want to roll it out? And again, we want to give you a maximum flexibility here as management to implement this. And so we're going to draft it in that way. We're not going to be prescriptive, it has to do this or it has to do that. Just have a system. That's it. Does that seem reasonable?
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. So Counselor Jordan, just to clarify, are you seeking for a committee to request of a city attorney to draft the simple language that requires a job performance evaluation system?
Yeah, I would be looking, for an ordinance that would go in Division 2 somewhere, maybe in the area of 2-312 near where the personnel administrator is, or somewhere where they think it would be best. I don't think they need to go and even have something I have a 1-paragraph order here. I think they could do this in 2 to 3 sentences max.
Okay.
Just says, have a system. And if they could draft that up, that would do the trick.
Okay, great. Counselor Rivera, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. He just literally, Councilman Jordan just literally addressed what I was going to address with regards to like a system or like a plan being presented on like how it's expected to be rolled out. Even though it may not be set in stone or anything like that, it's just some form of a guidance moving forward, and not just for ourselves as counselors or employees, but for anyone in the future too as well. There's another election now, right? And then the next session will come through, and there'll probably be some new members. If there's new members, it would be nice for them to have a plan to look back to, right? About when things should be implemented. And it doesn't mean that it has to stick in stone with that, but at least there's like some sort of guidance. But again, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to entertain a motion that we request legal to put this into form. Attorney Degnan, do you have enough of a sense of what we're looking for to be able to give us a draft at our next meeting in May?
Good evening, counselors. I mean, I
Hi.
can draft a sentence. That's not an issue. The only thing I would consider is that it's just going to be something like, the mayor and personnel department will, draft or devise a system for job evaluation
Yes.
for all city employees. That's pretty much what we'd be writing. Is that sufficient for what you're looking for right now?
To my understanding, it is. Counselor Jourdain, is that what your intention is?
Yeah, I mean, I could help here if you want. Basically, it says that the mayor and personnel department shall be required to have a job evaluation system for city employees so that all employees receive goals, standards of performance, and an annual evaluation against those standards. That, I think, would do the trick.
Okay, I see that that's coming from the order that you have. So, and I hear things being stated that it'll be amended later, and I'm sure it will be. As the system, it comes, more information and guidelines come in place. There'll probably be an amendment to that ordinance, but I can draft that for May.
Okay, thank you, Attorney
Right,
Degnan.
and if I may just add, right, Kathy, maybe we may not even need to amend it in the future. If they just have a system, what we're just having is, this 1 to 2 sentences that just says they have a system. And then management will do its thing.
That's fine, Counselor. Thank you very much for that.
Okay.
Kelly, I saw your hand up earlier, but are you all set?
I am. It was just to
Okay.
recommend it annually to be in the language, but Counselor Jourdain took care of that at the end too.
Oh,
Thanks.
okay. All right. Well, thank you. Good enough. So can we have a motion to request the legal form for the next meeting?
Yep. Motion to request a legal form to the next meeting.
Second.
Second,
All in favor? Counselor Givner?
Yes.
Counselor Maldonado Velez?
Yes.
Counselor Rivera?
Yes.
Counselor Jourdain?
yes.
Counselor Bacon? Yes. So this will be tabled, waiting for the legal form for May 23rd, I believe that date is. Okay, on a 5-0 vote. Thank you. I'm seeing members of the planning board, so I'm thinking we have a quorum so that we can go to our joint public hearings, because we have a few of them. Okay. All right, so.
Yeah, I would like to apologize. We have a number of people who are ill, and it took us a while to gather those who are left standing.
Well, we're happy that you were able to
Glad to be here.
get a quorum.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
not to be, I'll defer to whatever the committee wanted to do, but I did notice that Counselor Murphy Ramboletti on item 11 and 12 are both personnel related. Did we want to do those?
Well, we
Or
have.
shall, or,
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 joint public hearings, and we have at least one person in chambers for one of them, so, who's been
Okay.
waiting since 6:30, so,
okay, I thought I would ask.
I'm sorry. She's also good for public hearing. Right, for the tiny houses, all right. So I'd like to entertain a motion to open the joint public hearing with the planning board for item 2.
Motion to open the joint public hearing with the planning board for item 2.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And item 2 is that the city council add a section for battery storage facilities to the zoning ordinance to reflect technology advancements and future need for such installations. New facilities will be reviewed through planning section major site plan review 10. And this has been continued from December and January.
Can I have a motion from a member of the planning board to open the public hearing for a zoning text change as previously described for battery storage facilities?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Sharon, can you call the roll?
By roll call vote, Lauren? Oh, was that Lauren or who was that seconded?
It was Rosanna. I
Oh,
said sorry.
sorry, Rosanna. So, all right, by roll call vote, Rosanna?
Yes, ma'am.
Nathan?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
And Lauren?
Yes.
Okay, so at our last joint hearing, we all agreed that we really needed a lot more information, and I think we're all generally relying on HG&E to be sort of keeping on top of this and letting us know what the developments are. And I'm not sure if anybody from our planning department has something to add at this time.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I
Jeffrey?
just wanted to know, we do have two members of the HG&E that are on Zoom, Steve Roy and John Zwerko.
Oh, okay, welcome, John Zwerko, and I'm not seeing Steve. Oh, Steve Roy, right next to John. Welcome. So do you have something that you can put into the public record for our hearing for this tonight?
We didn't have anything specifically prepared. I know we had submitted something back in December to the ordinance subcommittee. But we were just here to answer any questions that may have arisen from what the planning board was developing for a draft ordinance.
Okay, so really, and I'll defer to the planning board for their questions, but I guess for a city council, we're looking for guidance, particularly as we know we have the two large storage units in the industrial zone, but this seems to contemplate putting storage units through wider areas in the city. And so we were seeking information and advice relative to size, location, safety, et cetera.
Linda, Jeff
Burkott has
Burkott
his
has his
hand
hand
raised.
up.
Jeff, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Just a brief update. So we've had, we've been working on a draft ordinance, and we've had two very successful meetings in speaking with John Zwerko and Steve Roy. And we just met with them as recent as yesterday, and discussed, furthering our draft at length. Unfortunately, that draft is currently with one of our members who is ill this evening. So unfortunately, I can't provide to you a draft or rather an update other than letting you all know that we are actively working on it, and we have a very, after all these discussions, we have a very thorough draft in the works. But obviously tonight, we're not going to be prepared to necessarily discuss it unless there's any new input or anything from the public who wishes to speak, if there is anyone, or to further add. I don't have a draft that I can provide, but I will say that we are working towards that end, and we've had two very good meetings.
Okay, so my sense from our public hearings are that we were seeking that kind of feedback from the group that's working on it. So my request would be that we could be provided with that working draft prior to the next public hearing, wherever we determine it to be. And we do have a couple members of the public in chambers, and there may be some on Zoom. So I'd like to give anybody an opportunity who may have input relative to battery storage to give their name and address and provide their information to the committee. You can come to that microphone, and there's a button on the side of it. Just make sure it's on.
Oh, hello everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is William Diaz, and I live in Holyoke, 11 Phillip Drive. And a couple of my concerns is if we're putting these battery storages throughout the city, and we don't yet have the technology to put it to use, we're going to have energy sitting idly, going to waste, and we're going to be wasting our energy to charge up these batteries without using it. I feel like before we actually start building these storage containers around the city, we actually have to have a use. They have to either be going to the homes of the families, and honestly, I've been thinking about actually having solar panels to charge these batteries throughout the city to limit the distance that it has to travel. So I guess my concern mainly is about the waste that's going to be because of it. So I guess thank you.
Thank you. Good food for thought. Councilor Rivera. Sorry, I almost missed you.
No worries. My question has to do with the language that's being put together. If the language is put together, does that, because my understanding is any language that's presented to us, we should have it like at least a week before or at least a couple of days before the meeting that we meet. Does that still apply? That's the first thing, right? Because if they're going to present something right now, we didn't even get to see it. That's one piece. And then I think the other piece that kind of speaks to, I kind of need more of an understanding of what the purpose of the battery storage is other than just storing the energy for now. Because no one has actually explained that piece. Like, I get the piece of that there's new wave coming and we're trying to store energy and all this other stuff, but what are the purposes behind it? Like, there has been no actual speak or presentation on that. So I'm kind of clueless as to what's kind of going on, and I've been to all the meetings, just so you know. But just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think we're all together in that regard. I see John Zwerko has his hand up, and maybe he can fill us in a little.
Sure, I can help answer any questions. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, so thanks, Councilor Rivera, for that the question, and thanks to the member of the public for that question as well. So for a little bit of technical background, we actually have 2 utility scale battery systems in the city of Holyoke today that we're actively using. There is no waste of energy going on. We are charging up the batteries, and we are actively dispatching them during strategic peak periods in order to help reduce some of this, the local electric's peak demands during specific times throughout the month. So the energy doesn't go to waste. We are actively using that energy and dispatching these to help reduce peaks on H3E's local, and it's also helping the regional grid as well during peak periods.
Okay.
Will it keep prices down if we're actually more energy in and we're saving it, so that way we don't have to later on buy more energy?
Yes, that's exactly today's main reason for battery storage is to save ratepayers money. So the strategic dispatch of these storage systems today are directly benefiting ratepayers and directly saving ratepayer money. And it's stabilizing our rates, and it's keeping our rates as low as possible. So yes.
Thank you for that. And then the last piece I think is, and if it could happen, is if there can be like somewhat of an analysis of how much could be expected to be saved per new battery that gets put out. Obviously the numbers will go up and down over time, but like I mentioned before, something that's like a guidance that serves as us as a tool for something just to gauge it, that would help out. But if you can't because it's too soon and there's a lot of things. I totally understand that piece too, but it's just something to be able to put out to the public to let them know how much money is being saved, how many things, what's happening, you know what I mean? But thank you again for everything you're putting out for information-wise.
Thank you.
Sure,
I wanted-
that shouldn't be a problem being able to prepare some financial savings that directly benefits our customers.
Thank you. I also wanted to give Steve Roy a chance to answer any of the questions if he wanted to add anything.
Just to echo what John said, the energy storage, it has four key benefits. One is load management. Systems can be strategically positioned in close proximity to our load center substations and end users to help prevent costly infrastructure upgrades. So by being able to put the power where the end users are, it helps to eliminate the need to run larger cables or wires all the way across the city to the end user for that smaller amount of time when the usage is at peak. They do help to keep the costs competitive. They help to reduce our transmission costs through peak load reduction, help defer, as I mentioned, large capital infrastructure improvements otherwise needed to support the increased loads. It helps us just to keep our rates affordable because it is deferring significant upgrades to our local system that will be needed for economic growth and demands from future electrification to meet the state's carbon reduction goals. Also, for clean energy deployment, these systems help reduce environmental impacts by reducing the need for higher emitting fossil fuel generation during peak periods, just because you're able to store clean power or power generated during non-peak periods and then deploy it during the peak usage. And then also for reliability, the systems do help to improve our power quality and overall system reliability for our end users.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilor Maldonado Velez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say real quickly, just as the maker of the order, little background as to how it was even put into council. There was a point last year where a resident actually reached out and that she had two concerns around the battery storage facilities. One of them for her was knowing as technology advances and as these battery storage facilities may get smaller, her understanding that neighbors, whatnot, may want these things on their property. So making sure that there is something outlined as we're talking about how we're increasing the access to them, making sure that that's made very clear where it cannot be allowed and what those specifications are. I think in the other side of that too, her concern was the waste. So her thing is every time there's a new industry, there's new something. For her, it's like the city of Holyoke doesn't really think about what comes after there's this new technology. So if there is better technology, I'm not one of the engineers, I don't work at HG&E, I don't know, what will happen to these battery storage facilities that we're putting up and really being mindful of that when the next technology comes. So that's just from resident perspective. And then literally 2 days later, I got an email from Aaron Vega to put in this order. So it just seemed perfect. So I just wanted to give that background as to what the residents are asking for when they want to see an ordinance with these. Thank you.
I'll defer to planning board.
Does anyone from the planning board have anything else to add?
I see Nathan Chung's hand up.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not.
Aaron's hand was up prior to that.
Yes.
The problem, Madam Chair, I'm not able to connect, so I keep trying to connect, so I can't see. If
If you want me to recognize folks from planning board, I'm happy to do that.
If I can get in, I will take over, but right now I'm not able to connect.
Okay, all right. So
Thanks.
Nathan Chung, you have the floor.
I'd like to, Aaron. Yes, thank you, Sharon.
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. So just real quick, I've learned a lot while working with John Zwerko and Stephen Roy and the whole team over at HG&E. So it's great. But let me just give an example, especially to Councilor Rivera, one of your questions. One of the things that this could be when you talk about in what it would look like in the city and what some of this looks like in reality on the ground, kind of easier to understand in some ways, would be as more homes start to have more electric vehicles and more electric uses for heat pumps and electric uses for heat, et cetera, in the houses. One option is to put in new transformers, which are bigger and a lot more costly. These local battery storages would be able to defer those costs and be much more localized. And so you definitely want to be mindful of where we're putting them. That's why we want to do the ordinance, obviously. So thank you to our council for filing this order to have this discussion and address this. So really there's the bigger use that HD talks about where we save the energy and on those off-peak times now that, but it's also about these localized as the demand becomes more increased locally in these neighborhoods. It's more cost effective to do these instead of upgrading all the transformers.
Thank you.
That's all. Sorry, I'm trying to so you can hear that. So, yeah, just wanted to put that out there. It's sort of a real work, especially from the council perspective, because again, we're sort of in between always talking to HG&E about this and then sort of trying to break it down to something that's more tangible in our districts, in our city.
Thank you. Nathan Chung, we had a little confusion there. You have the floor now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just want to add some details. It addresses some of the councilors' different questions and also what the public member commented. And the HG&E experts are here, so if I have any mistakes, I welcome them to correct me. And I actually had some meetings with them. So I think one thing that really sort of this ordinance, this order question. So currently there exists industrial level battery storage systems as the HG&E staff described. I think what we're trying to answer and explore with this new order is individual residential uses, much smaller structures that are accessory structures that are located in like people's backyards, for example. And we don't have an ordinance for that. So I think that's, and the HG&E staff can answer this better, but, like whether these individual home residential use systems, if they have the same type of benefits or whether they have some different types of benefits and characteristics, that's something they can answer more in detail. From a zoning perspective, I think, and our chair, Mimi, is working on the draft, but some of the things we talked about from a zoning perspective that we want to focus on, and again, this may change, but what we talked about are some main factors for zoning, such as the aesthetics, the footprint, the height, the potential noise, because these do generate some humming noise depending on the unit type, potential off-gassing. There is the fire risk and the capacity concerns, but they may be better addressed through like wiring department or HG&E's wiring department or the fire department. And there is actually a National Fire Prevention Association guideline already written in existence for these battery energy storage systems for home use. And they define recommended capacity limits and whatnot. And let's see what else. So the concerns the public may have brought, we are considering them, and I think the sort of the profound implication to think about is what are the benefits and the impacts and trade-offs if we update our zoning to allow these in residential backyards as accessory structures, for example. What does it look like? What does that mean? So I'm gonna stop there, and if maybe the HG&E staff or some other, whoever is appropriate, can maybe possibly expound upon whether allowing this in residential uses, much smaller structures, whether allowing these in residences will have somehow different impacts and benefits compared to the industrial systems currently in existence. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just have questions for the folks that will be sending us a draft. So we've heard the large industrial existing battery storage units, which are allowed in our zoning. And now we're talking about individual ones in a backyard as an accessory structure. I guess initially my understanding was that there was going to be something in between those two things that would be located somewhere, but closer to the area where the energy was needed. But I wasn't perceiving it to be each home. So I guess my question would be, will we have levels that we can look at in a draft ordinance that talks about neighborhood storage unit perhaps, and what that might look like versus an accessory unit in a home, at a home, versus the industrial use so that we could have maybe at least 3 categories that we're looking at, because in the order it talks about major site plan review, and usually that would be for a really large development. And so it seems like we have to have pieces that are going to define different levels and different complexities, if I'm hearing things. And if the committee is with me on this, it would just be a request from the committee to flesh that out in the draft a little bit. Yeah, okay.
John Zorko has his hand up.
John?
Yeah, I just want to give a brief update on the last conversation that Jeff from planning and Mimi from the planning board had yesterday. The way we left it is, yes, there will be basically 2 different categories. We don't want to burden the planning board with these like small several battery installations throughout the city. So in order to prevent that, we sort of put a footprint threshold, because over time these could get smaller if we put a size threshold on these batteries. So the way we left it, which you'll see in the draft, is that anything over 200 square feet and is considered and is not considered an accessory structure to the building that is on the property will trigger a site plan review. Anything under 200 square feet and is considered an accessory structure will not trigger a site plan review. We felt that was a pretty fair approach to whether or not these battery storage systems trigger a site plan review. And to put that into perspective, a 200 square foot footprint is basically a parking spot. So anything larger than a parking spot would trigger a site plan review, which would go through its own separate stringent setbacks and noise requirements, screening requirements, and such. So that's basically where we left it, and that's what we think is going to be in the draft that you'll see. When it comes to area, we're going to leave that up to the planning board to decide. There will be a future need for these throughout the city in all zones, whether it's immediate or not. There will be a need for it, but whether it's allowed in all zones or not, we're going to leave that language to be drafted by the planning board.
Counselor Givner?
I just have a point of clarification. Thanks, Madam Chair. Where is this power coming from?
The power directly comes from the electric grid.
Okay, so this is city implemented, and it's coming from the electric grid from the city. It's not coming from individual homes, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Steve Roy has his hand up, Linda.
Actually, real quick.
Counselor Maldonado Velez, and then I'll go to Steve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick follow-up. I guess it's kind of follow-up to that question, because I guess also with Counselor Bacon's like levels mentioning about that. Is it something like, can residents currently put in battery storage units that are small enough, like currently right now, without needing HG&E involvement at all? That's just sort of my question.
Yes and no. If they install a system that operates in parallel with the grid, which means they could send electricity back onto the grid, that will require HG&E approval. If they install a battery that's strictly for backup purposes, that powers just the home in cases of power outages and cannot export power to the grid, they do not need HG&E approval.
So that's like the size of like a generator? Is that pretty much okay?
Exactly, yeah. It's like a 3x5 piece of equipment that sits on a wall.
Okay. So, okay, thank you.
Counselor Rivera?
I guess a follow-up question. So, because it went to a different realm now with all this extra stuff that Linda kind of pointed out. if it's put on, so I guess for me though, like if this is HG&E property, I'm assuming, or will it be the person's property if they're putting it on their lot? And then if they're putting it on their property, right, are they being compensated in some way for having it on their property or anything like that? Or like, are they allowing, I'm still trying to understand where it's like, if someone's putting it on the land themselves for themselves, or they're putting it on the land to help HG&E to do relays and stuff like that. And then if they are, then they're just doing it for free. So like there has to be more to it. Like I'm trying to like unpeel the layers. So if someone can help me with that.
Steve or John?
So our current arrangements, they're kind of joint ventures where a developer, they put up the capital and they either own the property or they end up leasing the property from the property owner. And then based on the savings that we receive, for our capacity and transmission costs, those are shared between the developer and HG&E customers. So as far as HG&E goes, it's a win-win for us because we're not putting up any direct capital, but we're ending up lowering costs for our ratepayers.
So I guess for me though, and this is the part where everybody's gonna hate me, right? It kind of feels like if someone were to add a garage to their house, their property tax would change, wouldn't it? Because you're adding a piece to your house. And if you're adding a battery storage to your house or to your property, to the land that you own, would that change the tax rate of that property? Because now you're adding value and you're adding an asset to that property.
So typically with battery storage, there are arrangements that have historically been made with the city, which is known as payment in lieu of taxes. So yes, there is an added value that's being added to the property, and there are taxes, payments in lieu of taxes that are paid to the city on an annual basis.
That's through HG&E, not through the person that's actually leasing the property though.
That is through the person who owns the battery system.
So they would agree to a pilot with the city?
That's correct, yes. And there's two of those. There are two of those that are existing today.
Wow, that's news to me. Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll recognize you in a minute. So I actually have more questions now than I had before. So I would like to understand if a battery storage unit is the size of a parking space, that would seem to limit a residence having this. That's a lot of space for a regular house. So this sounds more commercial to me than residential, 200 square feet. Am I off base there?
That's correct.
Yeah, the discussion with the planning board yesterday was at this time was more to limit it more towards commercial and industrial areas rather than make a blanket.
Okay, because I was having
blanket,
trouble.
allowance for everywhere in the city at this point, and then more to adopt the ordinance or make an amendment to the ordinance at a later time when electrification is further along in the process and the demand across the city has increased enough where it's going to be required to be further deployed throughout the city.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense to me because I'm kind of thinking back to the public comment that was made around waste and how many of these we would be putting everywhere and why. So, okay, that helps. We have a member from the public who wishes to speak. You can give us your comment.
Hello again, it's William. This brought up another question for me. So not everybody is going to agree to have these batteries on their property. And the energy that's being stored in these batteries, I assume that the property owner is going to be responsible for that. And let's say their neighbors goes above, they require some more energy to be given. I assume the reason these batteries are being put in place is to make it easier to get that energy to them when they need it. And if that energy is already being paid for by the customer and it's on their property, and then it gets taken out to go help somebody else provide energy to their home, Are we going to get reimbursed for that energy?
I guess that would be to Steve or John as a,
Yeah, that would be no different. We have a distributed generation policy that compensates customers for that things of that nature. It's no different than currently solar customers that have solar panels on their roof. For the power they export back to the grid, they do get a payment for that.
okay, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Jeffrey, do you have some information we need?
Yeah, actually, no, I just wanted to point out that there's actually a member of the public on Zoom with their hand raised. I think you might not be seeing it, so if you scroll over your screen and see the little participants icon at the bottom, hit that.
Yes.
And you'll see the column to the right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so in the attendees, there's a member of the public with their hand raised.
Okay. I will recognize Nathan Chung while I'm searching for the public attendee.
Thank you. Just want to thank the HCN staff for the update. I wasn't at the meeting, so wasn't aware of these new updates. And just one factor to consider is, well, it's not guaranteed, but because these systems are rather pricey from my understanding, the price sort of puts a natural barrier to everybody just going out and getting these systems. Of course, these may change as the technology changes and the demand for them, changes. But that's just one interesting detail about these systems. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Kirsten, I see you on Zoom, and sorry I didn't see you before, but we can hear from you now as a member of the public.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. All right, great. I would just like to add on this topic, just that I have a concern about the fire. So I would hope that in the ordinance that there could be included training for the fire people, and also that that there's an area around it where they're including coverage like sprinklers, anything that helps. Yeah, and also just, I don't know if it has an impact on power quality. If it does, then I would like that to be addressed if possible. So that's it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions. I think there've been a lot of really good questions asked tonight, and I hope that some of the answers will get woven into the draft. So those are the requests coming out of, I think, our joint committees. And I would ask that the folks that are working on the draft language to send that out to all the members as soon as possible. This is fairly complicated. It's hard to remember all the details in this kind of back and forth discussion. And I just find it very helpful to be able to see it in writing to get my arms around it a little better.
Yeah, that's our intention.
That would be great. Not seeing any more hands at this moment, I'd like, I think, to entertain a motion if everybody else agrees to continue this public hearing to a date certain. I'm not sure. It sounds like there's information out there that could be shared with us in the fairly near future. Maybe planning folks, if you can tell us what might be good for you.
Well, when is your next scheduled meeting?
May.
Is it the 23rd?
Yes. But there's already, well, there's some things on the 23rd, but we could fit this too.
Well, my proposal would be that the planning board would continue to our next meeting, May 9th, to work on it. I know we have a subcommittee working on it, but then in the planning board, we can continue the public hearing and refine it for you. And then also, whenever is the next good time in your schedule, we can come back together for a joint public hearing.
So we could.
If that's May 23rd.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay.
I'm assuming, Sharon and Jeff, we don't.
If that gives everybody.
We're able to do a joint public hearing with them on the 23rd? That fits our
Yes,
schedule?
we can.
Okay.
Okay. So motion to continue the public hearing for item 2 until May 23rd at 6:30 p.m.
Is there a second? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I don't think we need roll call for that.
No.
Okay.
So for the planning board, can I have a motion to continue our public hearing on this matter to May 9th with noting that we will rejoin the ordinance committee for a joint public hearing on May 23rd as well?
And I would like to add, I would like to add to the motion that we want to have a draft ready well in advance for the ordinance committee review prior to doing the joint hearing.
That's fine. Are you making the motion?
Yes, and with that addition, I'm making the motion. Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Sorry.
No.
Okay, all those in favor by roll call vote? Rosanna?
Yes, ma'am.
Nathan?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
And Lauren?
Yes.
And then if we can go to 6, because that Kirsten is for 6.
The tiny houses, correct? Tiny houses?
Yes.
So,
That.
yep, so we're going to go to item 5.
And then after that, 6, if we can.
Okay, so motion to take up item 5 and open up the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So item 5 is ordered that the zoning ordinance be amended to add a section for tiny houses in addition to amending section 2 definitions and any other sections that may apply to this use. So public hearing's open.
Ask the planning board to open the public hearing on the zoning text change to add a section for tiny houses in addition to amending section 2 definitions. Thanks. Can I have a second?
Second, anyone?
Second.
By roll call vote, Nathan?
Yes.
Rosanna?
Yes, ma'am.
Kate?
Yes.
And Lauren?
Yes.
Okay, so we're in the public hearing, and these orders were all filed at the request of planning. We do have a guest in the audience who has some information they'd like to share in the public hearing.
My understanding was that Aaron Vega was going to be the spokesperson for this to start us off.
Okay, great.
I hope I'm correct in that, Aaron.
Aaron?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, so this is another one that we're just starting the conversation, similar to battery storage, and this is again another ordinance that lots of municipalities are looking at. As we look at how we want to utilize not just our downtown residential, but also what allowances we may make in bigger, perhaps development.
Recording stopped.
Well, I don't know who did that, but I can hit record.
The annex ghost. maybe.
Recording in progress.
Okay.
You're live again.
All right. So lots of municipalities are looking at this. So whether it's for downtown or whether it could also be out in our more rural areas, for Ward 5, we think about subdivisions. Would we look at different rules around subdivisions if there was tiny houses? So lots of, again, different municipalities are looking at this. So I think this is an important issue for us to consider. So this was, again, just to start the conversation. So opening this public hearing, gathering information. The planning board has been a staff, Jeff Burkott and some of our staff, we've been looking at different examples. And so this is the start of this conversation. So we look forward to, I know this has been brought up in different conversations in the city council when we talk about different, when we talk about the ADUs and other things. So all part of the same conversation as we talk about housing options in the city of Holyoke.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And I'd like to open up for any member of the public, and we do have with us, if you could come to the microphone and give us your name and address and any information that you'd like to give us to put into the record for consideration on this.
Hi, my name is Kaylee DeGrace. I am a resident at 99 Meadowbrook Road. It's Ward 5.
Can you just spell your last name for me? I just didn't-
DeGrace, DeGrace.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to point out Jeffrey has my contact information.
Okay.
So I am a tiny house owner builder, and I obviously support putting in an ordinance for tiny houses. I now live in Holyoke, and I would love to bring my house here. And so any questions that you have, I'd be happy to answer them. I've lived in 2 different tiny houses, one I built myself, and I've lived in them completely off-grid, like we're talking like not even cell service kind of scenarios. So as far as like utility options, hookups, all of that, I can answer a lot of questions about that if you have any. They're definitely an option that Holyoke wants to look into, just for sustainability. I mean, just shrinking your footprint just totally changes your entire lifestyle and reduces your resource use overall. Also the mobility, people are able to move in a lot easier, move out if there's if they get a job somewhere else. And also the affordability. So it's an affordable housing option because it's so much cheaper. People are able to pay for it themselves. You don't have to have city subsidies. You don't have to have developers come in. It's much more affordable for the city as well as for the residents. So it's definitely an option that you want to go in. I'm available to answer any questions.
So I have a question. I was intrigued by the idea because when I first heard about tiny houses, I was thinking of a permanent structure that got hooked into everything. And then this concept of a movable tiny house was a different kind of a twist to me. I found it kind of interesting, but then I was kind of wondering how that would work, as a practical matter with septic and sewer and all those kind of logistics.
So there are ways to hook them all up to city systems. It's actually a lot easier because Holyoke has a city system because you can just tie into systems that are already in place.
So it'd have to be on a sewer system.
It would, yes.
Okay. All right, that helps.
So typically these are placed in urban scenarios.
Okay.
They're typically placed in backyards.
Okay.
And so they would hook into the system that's already there.
All right. That makes sense to me. Well, thank you. You're welcome. And we'll be getting into this a lot more over time too. So,
Linda, Kristen has her hand up.
Okay, Kirsten, thank you. You have the floor.
Hi, okay, it's Kirsten Beatty, and I'm at 149 Central Park Drive in Holyoke. It's interesting that you're having this because I just picked up at the library a copy of a book from ARP, and it's on this topic, and they have ordinance ideas, and it's great. It's called the ABCs of ADUs, or accessory dwelling unit. I can drop a copy by perhaps tomorrow, but I'm at home at the moment. And the other thing that I'd just like to bring up too is I like the idea of accessory dwelling units in that there's a person who owns a lot and they have an extra house on it, but there's an owner of the land that cares about the rental because they're directly there. So if they're approved, I'd kind of like them to be approved for people who own a property as opposed to having like an absentee landlord who owns a bunch of small homes or tiny homes. Because I could see that could be a problem, because when you look at like campgrounds where you have the mobile houses, a campground where you have a bunch of tiny homes, it doesn't have the same class. because usually the owner of the lot, they don't really care about how it looks. And the other thing that's interesting is the topic of how it hooks up to the utilities. I know that there are people in permaculture that talk about how maybe there are alternatives to using the sewage, that you can create like your own off-grid system. And I don't know if that's, I don't think Holyoke is prepared for that, but in the future, I believe I would absolutely support the idea of people creating an off-grid alternative that, as long as it was ecological. So I guess that's all I had to add, so.
Oh, well, thank you. And if you drop that document off at the next public hearing, we can accept it into the record and make it part of the information that we consider when we're looking at the ordinance.
Oh, okay, great, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Katie, you can come back to the microphone if you'd like.
Thank you. I'd like to add to that. I do have copies. Great Barrington, Massachusetts has an ordinance. I believe the planning board already has copies of it.
Okay.
But I have additional copies for city council if you'd like to take a look at it.
If you have it with you, we could accept it. Sure. Nathan, I see you. I recognize you.
Aaron was, I think, first, or?
Oh.
Okay. Yeah, he's waving.
I'm not, he's waving his hand, but I'm not seeing the yellow hand. That's why I keep missing him.
He chose a hand with the darker, a darker
now
tone.
I see it.
It's a
Okay,
darker
Aaron,
tone.
I'm sorry. I'm not doing that intentionally.
Oh, yeah, it's just a quick comment. I think this is in kind of response to what Kirsten, the member of the public, commented. Looking at the lessons, it's a nationwide problem right now with a lot of RVs that are on leased land, where the land lease fee is so high that it's no longer becomes affordable housing, really. And also, when RVs are different, I mean, not RVs, my apologies, mobile homes, manufactured homes, I'm sorry. So these usually on a land that the tenants don't own. And so the landowner has much power over how much rent they must pay. So, if that is a lesson, if while we are exploring this ordinance, that's something to consider what the impact will be. And let's see. Well, I actually reviewed the Great Barrington document. I'm sorry, Paul, I forgot her name, but one of the public members referred to, but I think maybe I'll pause for now and allow other people to speak before I add any more comments. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Aaron?
Thank
Sorry
you,
about
Madam
that.
Chair. I think as we look at this, I think we should look at this somewhat in phases. There's lots of social and environmental options to think about as we look at this. But I think practically, as we look at this today, I would refer back to Councilor Bacon, your first comment about there is many ways to envision this, but I think when we think about, a concrete pad, a smaller house, I think what we want to talk about is if we were to allow smaller houses on the same lot, if we would talk about what's a buildable lot, what would be the setbacks, what would we allow if someone wanted to put, 2 homes on this, if someone was to make a subdivision and have, 10 or 12 of these, what would be the acreage requirements? It wouldn't be the same if they were going to be, traditional size houses, I guess I'll say. So those are the kind of practical things I think would be kind of really a phase one. Down the road, hopefully maybe even get that together and have that be an ordinance, and looking at what are the trends out there, what are the other trends we need to adopt for. So I think heading down to like some of the practical matters as we go forward with the conversation would be important as well to kind of keep it in context, because there's lots of different directions that can go in, but thinking about those requirements, and again, I think being hooked up to the utilities, with some kind of foundation, could the home itself be lifted from the foundation and moved? Sure, we've seen that happen as well. That's fine, but I think a more, in a stream of a traditional unit on place on a lot. So would we allow, 2 units like this in the current lot that we allow 1 unit? Those kind of things I think should be part of the conversation for the first phase of this conversation.
Okay. So do you see that as kind of going along with the ADU ordinance that we passed, though? Only this is sort of a next piece of that
It's the next,
concept wise?
yeah, it's the next, they're definitely in tandem, I would think, and I think that they.
But a different piece, yeah.
But a different piece, and this would also, I think in some ways, this applies more to somewhat new development. When we look at current vacant lots, especially when we look at vacant lots in downtown that technically now are not buildable because of their setback, because of their frontage.
Okay.
Would we allow on these today unbuildable lots, would we allow a tiny house by certain dimensions to be on this lot because it's a smaller setback, smaller frontage? That's the kind of one aspect we should be looking at. If somebody had a lot that, again, they could build one house on today, would we allow there to be two? Similar to an ADU, I think today, I think why we wanted to look at the traditional zoning downtown for ADUs today was, are there already existing structures that would add this? Do they have enough space to actually add one? So again, yes, kind of all the same umbrella, talking about how do people want to have options for living, and how we want to address the housing crisis, but also really provide options as people move up the economic ladder. That's been a big discussion for us in Holyoke. Having nicer units, being more independent before you're ready to really own a home. So having all those different options is a good environment to have when we have a housing environment and an industry here. So, but again, I think coming back to those basics, like, we look at those unbuildable lots today. What would we want to do to allow it to be buildable, perhaps with a tiny home?
Right, and being able to put it into constructive use rather than a vacant property.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Addresses blight, it brings more money in the tax rolls, all the things we want to be doing. So this is that's another way of looking at this, that housing has definitely become, part of our conversation on economic development. So this is, part of that conversation.
All right, so, committee members, would you like to see a draft that looks at the idea of the kinds of things that Aaron was outlining? To see some language around that as a first phase? Or do you want to go?
I think there's a draft and.
Hang on. So
the draft that you have
Aaron,
is from elsewhere and hasn't. It may be lovely, but hasn't taken into account any of our local questions.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we would really need to request that planning in conjunction with Attorney Dagden take a look at some language to come to us.
Yep.
Relative to this.
Councilor Jordan has.
Councilor Jordan.
Yeah, I think you just raised my question. I would like to see something that is being proposed for Holyoke, whether that's modeled, if Aaron wants to draft that or the law department, but whoever the lead proponent of this is, it would be helpful for us to have something to redline and start asking questions and thinking about the permitting process and, all the points that were raised here, as opposed to, somebody just setting up a tiny house in somebody's backyard, and now neighbors are concerned that, how many people are going to live in the tiny house? Is it a whole family? A couple and children? I mean, how are we going to regulate all of that? And most of our building codes are designed around certain square footages and different things. I don't think it necessarily contemplated this. I'm certainly well aware of what these are, and they really work for a lot of people. But, is it a place where we really want to not necessarily on smaller, lots, it would be allowed with that already have a home or two? But is it more something where, somebody has a 1/4 acre lot that's empty downtown, we would allow 3 of these to go there, as an ability to create more affordable housing? How do we do it innovative while at the same time not creating a nuisance potentially for, we have to respect everybody's investment, right? I mean, if I buy into a residential neighborhood and all of a sudden, my next door neighbor puts in 1 tiny home, 2 tiny homes in their backyard and now have 6 more people going in and out? What's the parking situation going to be relative to that? I mean, just because you own a tiny home doesn't mean you don't have a car. And if there's no driveway, is this more on street? You know, there's just a lot of nuances to it that we have to think about and do it in a creative and thoughtful way. And, you know, how would we handle objections? How would we handle if people do have concerns? When everybody's in agreement, these things are easy, but when there's disagreement and neighbor issues conflict, that's when we have to make sure everyone is being treated fairly and everyone's investment is being respected. So I just want whoever the drafters are to kind of contemplate that. And interested, I'm really just keeping a totally open mind about the whole thing and looking at it from the perspective of, you know, where can we reasonably make this okay? And on the other hand, prevent it where it shouldn't be too. So interested to see what we come up with.
We agree, Counselor, and again, this is the first step, you know, and again, in this process, so opening this hearing where we can take information, obviously hearing initial comments, and we will be able to sort of form a working group between staff, planning board, obviously welcome to have council input and, you know, just ask this to be continued, and again, just be, you know, as we are able to, it helps us with these timelines, right? It helps us to have it on the agenda and, you know, get us focused on things. So this is something we want to work on. So again, we look forward to working with you on it, and we'll be working with our building department because obviously a lot of this stuff is already there, just have to be sort of tweaked, as you mentioned, and transferable, you know, to a smaller scale, so to speak. So we'll be coming back with you, but wanted to start the conversation and get sort of the initial reactions.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Counselor Givner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify or make sure that I'm clear on what this is about. I'm under the impression that the original ordinance we were working on that accommodates ADUs was specifically for specifically for homes to add an ADU in their backyard. So it'd be owner occupied. You could not sell it separately. The person who owns the property would essentially own the tiny home as well. So I see this as not just adding an amendment, but basically like a next section to the tiny home ADU category in Holyoke. In which case we can obviously address any concerns about, you know, lots of tiny homes. I feel like that would be addressed differently. And it seems like currently we've only allowed ADUs in the downtown residential district. So anything else we do, I don't think now is the time to worry. It's more a time to figure out what we're trying to do. So yeah, I support sensible tiny home improvements to our city that work, and it sounds like we're figuring out the language and how that would be, but I don't think we need to fear suddenly a single family home putting 10 of these in their backyard. I don't think we don't have ordinances that allow it now, and I can't imagine we would allow it.
Right.
So
Right.
I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Nathan Chung?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, the Great Barrington document that has the AD ordinance, obviously not local. If I'm reading it correctly, the way it was written, the movable tiny homes are allowed as ADUs that's subservient to existing single family or two family. I mean, that's a sort of gentle way to introduce things. So the other, you know, sort of the whole other end of spectrum is, can you have a lot with a lot of these movable tiny homes? And the other thing is, you know, I mean, if you want some working examples, I understand Spur in Texas to be a small city, small town that is very tiny home friendly. They're actively encouraging them as sort of a ways to attract newcomers. And one of the way they deal with some of the recent concerns about tiny homes is they require the wheels to be removed once the homes are permanently settled in their pad. So that's just, you know, so if you are trying to get some working examples and past success and failure stories, that might be a potential municipality to explore. And lastly, I have a question for the planning OPED staff. would you know if, so as the current zoning and building codes stand, can you have multiple detached homes on a single lot? So basically detached multifamily on a parcel. Is that allowed by the current zoning or is that not allowed?
Well, it depends on what zone that it would be in. I mean, right now, arguably, you can have a tiny house on what would be deemed a buildable lot, as long as it meets building code. You know, we don't care if you live in a phone booth, as long as it meets the required codes. But, you know, that is the trigger, though. If you're putting more than one on a site, that's something that this ordinance is gonna touch upon. Because right now, unless it's zoned appropriately for multifamily, multiple living units, that's where we don't have that. Or rather, that's where they could currently go, but it's the idea of, I guess, putting this, like, say, in an RA district, and that's one thing we need to explore. When it goes into what would be deemed single-family zones, that's what we've got to explore.
And I'll just remind you, in the RA zone, there's no sewer. It's all septic. Just a friendly reminder. All right, it sounds like we have a lot of questions and we have some language. What is the pleasure? I'll defer to planning, I think.
My sense, and Jeff and Sharon, maybe you can help me with this, is we have time in our nearby agendas to do things that are kind of already in process. Like we said, you know, we would move forward on the battery storage, but a larger question like this, we're going to have to figure out where to slot it, unless most of this is done by a subcommittee that doesn't have to be part of our meetings. Otherwise, I'm looking at our agenda and thinking that, you know, maybe the second meeting in May, we might be able to talk about it in our meeting.
So if you're talking about it in your meeting, when will you want to have the joint public hearing, Kate? Are you looking into June?
Well, it sounds like for the joint public hearing, you want actually to see something from us, so that we're needing to meet before the joint public hearing.
Well, before I say anything, I just want to check in with committee. So we heard from Aaron that view of the tiny houses is to try to use properties that maybe currently we can't use. So that's one piece of it. Then we have some other pieces that are broader in scope. So does this committee want to start with a narrow focus and get language for that? Or would you like there to be any broader considerations at this point? Councilor Jourdain?
I'd say we should table this and let them bring the whole proposal, whether it's Aaron or planning staff or whoever's the lead sort of innovators on this idea and concept. Put it all out on a piece of paper, you know? What do you think? Consider all dimensions. I'm sure this will be just a starting point, and then we'll build on it from there as everyone kind of contributes feedback. But I would say take a widest scope you can. I mean, I think everyone here heard the tenor of the discussion. You know, what zones would this be allowed? What would setbacks? How many? How big? I mean, if you're drafting a zoning rule, you know, consider all the dimensions of that. Work with legal as to what could and couldn't be. What would people's appeal rights be and procedure to do this? Do they have to pay a fee to apply? Is this something that once they get it, it's good forever? Or is this something that it's a permit good for 5 years? You know, all these things need to be considered. You know, and I would say try and give us as much detail because it's a pretty comprehensive concept.
Right. Thank you for that. Jeff?
Thank you.
I agree with Councilor Jourdain, and I was going to I'm echoing that I think it should be as broad as we can make it, but also know that I think we need to do a lot more. You know, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and that we need to really start researching what other communities are doing. So to try to to try to specify whether it's narrow or broad, I mean, I think let's just try to go as broad as possible, because we don't really know what we're getting into yet. You know, this was just the first opening to see what the immediate desires of the public and the council, wish. But I think to keep it broad at this point, because, again, we don't know what we're really getting into.
Okay. All right. Well, so in thinking about a timeline then, since we'll be waiting for some information to come to council committee, what is a reasonable time frame, do you think, for planning staff and board? How far out should we go? Bless you.
Thank you.
I'm thinking that maybe we can have a first planning board meeting on it on May 23rd, not our next meeting, but the meeting after. But we need to, I think there needs to probably be a subcommittee or a working group on it as well. And I don't have a good sense of, I mean, you're not meeting most of the summer typically. So I think to come back to you realistically,
June seems a little bit quick.
June seems
from what
too
I'm
quick.
hearing. July is pretty much a quiet month unless there was something compelling. And so August 22nd, I think we already continued something to. So that's a possibility. Or September.
I guess my proposal would be that we as the planning board continue it to May 23rd and that August or September, one or the other for a joint hearing.
August?
Given the other things that we need to talk about here and their varying levels of urgency, maybe I'd say put this one to September because one of the other ones I see might feel a little more urgent in my read of what planning and op-ed might think.
Okay.
Is that fair, Jeff?
So then it would look like September 26th. If we stay in the pattern we've been on.
Am I reading the room correctly, Jeff?
Yes.
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 Okay.
So yeah, we can certainly meet on, the planning board can continue their meeting or hearing till May 23rd. And then even before that September date, if the board chose to meet again, just to have another board discussion on it in a public hearing. Yes, I mean, I think even if we have just a basic outline for the 23rd for the planning board, I think would be, moving forward. So certainly.
And again, I would make the same request that if there is some draft language that has been put together, if we could have that before the public hearing by about a week, just so we have time to look at things.
So, motion to continue the public hearing for item 5 until Tuesday, September 26th at 6:30 p.m.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So our public hearing is continued on tiny houses to September 26th at 6:30.
And so for the planning board, I'm asking for a motion that we continue our public hearing on this to May 23rd and possible future dates, and that we'll rejoin a joint public hearing on September 26th.
So moved.
Motion.
I need a
Actually,
second.
we need a second.
Sorry.
I got it.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call vote, Nathan?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Lauren? And, who am I missing?
Rosanna?
Me.
Rosanna. I don't even see where you are, Rosanna.
I'm lost.
Oh, there you are, that red thing. Okay, Rosanna.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So, motion to take up item 6 and open up the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. So item 6 is ordered that the zoning ordinance section 7.8 wireless telecommunication facilities and antennas be amended to include small wireless facilities.
Sorry, we need to open the planning board hearing. Can I have a motion to open the planning board hearing on the zoning text change for wireless telecommunication facilities and antennas, section 7.8?
So moved.
Second?
Second. Those in favor by roll call vote, Nathan?
Yes.
Lauren? Yes. Rosanna?
Yes, ma'am.
And Kate?
Yes.
Sit. No, come on. Get up.
Are they all set? Okay. So this is, I think, again, something that came through planning. I would just note that we do have a member from the public here who has corresponded with this committee a number of times over a number of years on wireless communication. So whoever wants to be the point person from planning, and then we'll go to the public comment.
Yeah, I think it's either Aaron or Jeff.
Yeah, well, Jeff has the history on this. So this is something that again has history in the city and has been something that's been requested from obviously people that are utilizing this service. So again, this is to adapt to new technologies and new demands out there. So, but there's obviously all sides to the story with this stuff. So I do know that Jeff has some. I think that Jeff has some history with this one, and so I think this could be a quote unquote simple amendment to allow for these, again, to sort of look at the new technologies and be in line with that. But obviously we want to hear from the public, but I think that Jeff has definitely some more context on this one.
Yeah, thank you. So just briefly, originally we had the telecom ordinance in 1996 that allowed for the breakdown of the monopoly of cell phones and so forth. Whatever. Technology's now gotten smaller, and now instead of building the big towers, they're looking to do more utility pole type installations. So, I know that most recently in the past year, I know there was some applications came forward to the building department seeking to install some of these, and at the time there was really nothing on the books to regulate these. So I do know that the building department advanced those permits, but in working or in hearing this. Originally, when the telecom ordinance was created back in the 90s, and then I think even amended in the early 2000s, we had help from attorney Ellen Fryman, who is an attorney who works for Verizon, but also being a local person, and also, I reached out to her again on the small telecom to kind of give us a draft for her impressions of what this ordinance would look like. And again, it's more or less just because the technology has just gotten smaller, and it's siting them on utility poles in the public right of way, on public streets. So it's to further address that and define what the things are and what's looking to be installed, and setting limits on those. For instance, that shall not be greater than 28 cubic feet. That the antenna shall not be greater than 5 cubic feet in volume, and that these are pretty much industry standards, or say a maximum of an industry standard, where maybe the standard's really 3, but just in case other carriers might be up to 5. So I don't know if that's enough background, but it's just that it is something that, again, the technology is looking is becoming smaller, and is going to start in order to complete coverage, is going to need to be installed in certain, say, neighborhoods or on certain streets. So I guess that's all I have, unless there's anything, if anyone has any questions.
Okay, thank you for that. And I totally get where that's coming from the technological point of view. Over time, there have been some health concerns raised with the proliferation of the high speeds and the effects and impacts that they may be having. So I'm just wondering, as we're putting more and more of this into the community and closer into more densely residential areas, if perhaps there isn't a role for our Board of Health to be taking a look at this and what general community impacts there might be from this. I'm just not sure all those considerations have been taken as we keep adding and adding a lot of this high-speed stuff. We start hearing things about the cell phones and the batteries and what effects they may have. So I'm just wondering, that's all. I see, Counselor Hibner.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I am curious about that. Is there data around that? Around the effects of this on communities or health?
So there have been some communications sent to committee, but not through this public hearing process. And we do have Kirsten, who spoke at the other hearing with her hand up for this hearing. So Kirsten, if you can repeat your name and address and give us your input on this, that would be great.
Great, yeah, I'd love to. So Kirsten Beatty at 149 Central Park Drive. Is it possible for me to share my screen?
It is. Jeffrey, can you make it possible for Kirsten to share her screen with us?
Sure, I just gotta have you promote to panelist, and then I'll make you a co-host so that you can then you share your screen.
And I see you, Counselor Rivera, after we hear from the public. Kirsten?
All right, you should be able to now.
Yes, we can see it. Kirsten, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
All right, so can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So in our state, there are people who have taken action, and in Boston, they've actually complained to the FCC, claiming that the FCC is not taking into consideration the health impacts. And then in Pittsfield, it's interesting, the Board of Health in Pittsfield actually issued an emergency order to ask that a tower be turned off. And even though the Board of Health issued the order, the town administrators refused to give them the cash in order to do the litigation. So at the moment, the issue is in the courts because the Board of Health supports it being turned off, but the town administrators have kind of blocked that. So it's in the courts. And it's interesting too that the Massachusetts Association for the Boards of Health has included the risk of these towers into the last 4 pages of its handbook, and it's also filed an amicus brief to support the people in Pittsfield who reported a ton of issues after the tower had been turned on. So it's easy to locate information online. The Board of Health, in that injunction that they gave, they're being supported in the idea that they actually have the right to turn off towers because they're supposed to be, according to the state law, they're supposed to be equivalent to the legislators. So it's an interesting avenue to turn off the towers. The other thing is that a couple towns are also talking about moratoriums because of the health concerns. So the reason that they're proposing it is because there have been a couple court cases, and in those court cases, the FCC has been told that they have to take environmental and health impacts into account in terms of all the exposure guidelines and all the infrastructure and all the rules that they have. And to date, the FCC hasn't complied. They have not updated their exposures, they haven't taken into account health impacts, and they're ignoring environmental concerns. And so there have been, important people high up who are experts in the government or experts in science who have complained, and they're being ignored. And the reason that you don't hear about it is because almost all the news is online, and it costs a lot to put information online. And so the industry is able to use a ton of propaganda. So I know if you go onto Google and you ask a question, that the top results that come up are usually in support of industry's point of view.
So Kirsten, if I can interject just to ask a question, is there some documentation available relative to the health issues that are being referred to in this?
Well, in the court cases that were put forward, there were, of course, a ton of there was a ton of documents that were turned in. For example, for the health impacts court case, that was the Environmental Health Trust, and also Children's Health Defense, so two organizations. The court case is called Environmental Health Trust et al. Versus the FCC. And in that court case, they used the research presented in the filings in a particular docket. Okay. And they had thousands of pages to turn in. However, I'll pull it up on the screen, a few examples. So,
Kate, did you have a question?
For example, if you go to the Environmental Health Trust online, then it's easy to locate health impact information because they have a lot. There's just a ton. It can be overwhelming. Mm-hmm. So I also have, if you go to the Environmental Working Group, that's actually a pretty big environmental group. They also have a fact sheet on how it harms the nervous system. So it changes the brain glucose metabolism, the brain blood flow, it changes sleep, it increases headaches, it causes behavioral changes, increases brain tumors, and it has effects on on your short-term memory. So it has impacts on kids if they're trying to learn, and it also has been connected to all the diseases of old age. So Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. There's also, if you go to firemedical.org, that's the Physicians Health Initiative for the Radiation and Environment. They have a consensus statement on health impacts. And then also, I am I'm the administrator for Last Tree Law. So if you go to Last Tree Law, there's also, I'll just scroll down. Hold on, I'm just trying to. The resources on that page have actually information on groups who can be contacted too. So there's a ton online. If you really would like to know, you can find it. You just may not find it if you're trying to use a conventional search engine.
All right. All right. Well, we very much thank you for bringing this information forth, because I think we should, consider, the different ramifications of what we're doing. I see a couple of questions, Kate.
Yeah, I think that my sense is that if we look, we're going to find a lot of information on both sides of this issue. And so I think it would behoove us to ask for input from our city experts on this to help us sort through that.
Absolutely.
I think it's wonderful to have the public bring our attention to that. But I know there would probably be pushback from the proponents of having this. So
Sure.
I would love us, whenever we're scheduling our next hearing, to have the Board of Health come.
Yes. That's what I
Perhaps
was
to have someone from the legal department come and update us about what is the status of these lawsuits that are happening in other Massachusetts towns. And there may be other experts from the city that we'd like to have, but those are the two that jumped out to me.
Yes.
I would like to have help sorting through that from our city experts.
Yeah. I was hoping the Board of Health would weigh in on this particular one.
In addition to Councilor Rivera, Councilor Bacon, we also have SSF Schatz, Schwartz, and Fenton on.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Rivera.
Thank you. I think some of the stuff was covered that I was gonna bring up by I can't right now. I'm sorry. I'm eating right now. I had my babies the whole time running rampant in the house, bro. I'm losing my train of thought. Ultimately, a lot of stuff was just covered, and that I was gonna bring up with regards to referring back to our professionals from the city, the health department, and some people from legal too as well, with regards to some of the stuff that was presented, because it is a controversial issue, and I do hear the concern with regards to the health. This is one of the things that my brother always argues with me about when he sees like the things on the set on the antennas, and there are times where he brings up valid points. There are times where he sounds wild, right? But in my mind, for me, the idea is to be able to acknowledge it and actually pay attention to it, so in case there are some real ramifications, and I don't want to be voting for something that's going to be possibly hurting the community overall. So I think it makes sense for us to bring in our own professionals to kind of speak on the matter and to give us some insight with regards to that. So thank you. I was going to say that already, but somebody said it for me, so thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I see a representative from SSF Schatz, Schwartz, and Fenton PC.
Hi. Good evening.
Hello.
This is Ellen Fryman. I guess I don't have a way to put my camera on. Anyway.
Can you repeat your name and address, please?
Sure. It's Ellen Fryman, Freyman, 1441 Main Street, Springfield.
Okay, thank you.
And so I've been working with Verizon for as long as they've been doing cell towers, probably almost 30 years. We've put up a number of towers and antennas in Holyoke, as well as throughout Western Mass. And actually, there are areas of Holyoke that are desperate for coverage. The mayor has met with people, representatives from Verizon, looking for us to be there and provide better coverage, especially in the downtown south of the city area. It's not easy to find good locations. We've looked at smokestacks, but then there's structural issues. We looked at rooftops, and then there's areas. But anyway, it's been a challenge to find the locations where we can put antennas. And so this is a way of addressing the situation in areas that are more dense, in that we can put up an antenna known as it's like a canister on an existing utility pole. So it eliminates the need to put up new pole, new 100-foot towers, and provides good coverage, but just for a shorter area, for a more, closer, smaller area. And right now, Holyoke does not have an ordinance to, as Jeff was explaining, to provide some controls over it. There actually are a number of canisters now on the poles that are owned by Holyoke Gas and Electric. Several, maybe more than a dozen that are up now, without any, the benefit of having an ordinance to outline what the requirements would be. So we're happy. I mean, even though we've been able to get these out without any kind of regulation, we're happy to provide that. Other communities, other neighboring communities have done the same in West Springfield and Chicopee. They're in Long Meadow. They're in almost all the other communities because it, again, to improve coverage, because that's actually what people are asking for. So that's why we think this is a good process for Holyoke and a good addition to the zoning regulations. And will facilitate coverage where it's desperately needed and wanted right now. Health concerns have been a concern since I started with Verizon 30 years ago, and the Telecommunication Act does prohibit towns or exclude towns from limiting service and denying coverage based on health concerns. And yes, you can find all kinds of information out there. Yes, there's lawsuits, but I don't know. I mean, that isn't my area. I just know that the people expect to have good service. They have phones. They use all kinds of technology that requires good cell service. And that I don't know that there's been a connection. I know there's certainly conjecture, but I don't know if there's been a connection to health concerns with phones. But you can find it on microwave ovens, you can find it on television, you can find it on a lot of the appliances that you have. So anyway, this is just a way of regulating what is actually happening right now in Holyoke, and in a way that it provides for more control by the city. And if you would like me to provide some information, additional information, I can talk to people at Verizon to see what they have in terms of, they are highly regulated. I would say they're certainly by their licenses have to monitor RF emissions. They certainly have to be within the limits. There is regular testing done, and but we do have information that we could provide. I wasn't expecting us to go into this tonight, but I can, every time we submit applications for cell towers, we do submit radio frequency measurements to show what it's going to be. So we're happy to provide that information, and any other questions that I can answer, just let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. And we certainly are very aware of people wanting dependable and consistent access to the technology. And I think we're just trying to do our due diligence to weigh everything, because as we're getting, as I've said now for a few years, I think the technology is sometimes exceeding our ability to manage it. But nonetheless, we're just trying to make sure that we consider all the different perspectives. Councilor Jourdain?
Excuse me, Madam Chair, real quick before you move on.
Councilor Rivera, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, Councilor Rivera, I would just like to ask her for her contact information and for Verizon's contact information, because a variety of people have been trying to reach out to Verizon for the last 4 or 5 years, I think, because there are a couple poles that need to be replaced in the flats that are really, really, really bad, and there are other places that need some help, and it's been I guess, a gauntlet trying to get in contact with Verizon. So if you could drop a number and an email for some of us counselors here so that we can have that, that would be great.
Yes,
Thank you.
Jeff Burkett has my contact information. Also, if possible, if I could get a copy of the PowerPoint that was shown by Kirsten, that would be helpful. So the Verizon, the wireless side doesn't do the pole side, but in terms of doing the pole, the canisters on the poles, in some cases we have worked with like Chicopee Gas and Electric as far as putting up new poles for them. So,
So what you're saying is that the poles that you guys own in Holyoke, you have no say so over that?
Verizon Wireless doesn't, but I can certainly, we have, I know that this issue came up in Chicopee and we made the connections and we resolved the problem. So I'm happy to do what I can to do the same thing for you.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay, Counselor Rivera.
So Jeff can give you my contact information.
Yeah, we'll reach out to Jeff. Thank you.
So Kirsten, the request has been made. Can you share your PowerPoint to our administrative assistant, Jeffrey Anderson Burgos, so that he could share it out to the participants?
Sure, yes.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Jourdain.
I'd like to thank everybody that participated this evening on this, and it's good to get a number of perspectives. I've always had my reservations and concerns about some of these towers. I've read, obviously competing things about them, and I think it'll be interesting again as this continues to develop in this area. Medically, I just think it would be helpful for us to continue to watch, the impact of all of this and just be sensitive to it. But one of the points I wanted to make was the Telecom Act that was referenced by the attorney. That has got to be probably one of the worst pieces of legislation that Congress has adopted from a consumer protection perspective that I have seen. I mean, it's so lobbyist heavy. For example, when we have tried to intervene on behalf of consumers relative to cable television, the Telecom Act is basically written by Comcast and the other cable TV providers that Washington, you can just see it's a big money machine down there, and they're totally driven by the lobbyists and the donors. That these things have stripped the powers away from municipalities to protect their local citizenry. And this extends to this area of the cell towers, and that Congress should do the right thing, but they will not, because, this is where both parties are getting all this money from these lobbyists that write these laws. And basically, it'll say things just like you heard tonight. You cannot consider what the potential health impact of any of this that you're actually passing is, because we've made it illegal for you to consider that. Just imagine that. Just imagine that something would be written in a law that would say, don't consider that. We hear a lot about, on the cable television side, things like you cannot consider programming when you're considering cable television. You cannot consider price. I mean, all the things that citizens care about, they've stripped our powers away and hold those with a kung fu grip in Washington. So I just wanted to observe that. I thought it was a timely moment to raise the Telecom Act, I believe of 1996. I believe that was when that was passed. Relative to this issue, I don't know if we're ahead of our skis here a little bit, but it would seem to me before we go about placing and having the G&E placing 12 canister towers up on light poles, that shouldn't we have already had this ordinance first? And it seems that, I mean, I appreciate the idea that, hey, you know, we're doing these all over the place. You might want some regulation and for you to actually consider a process for these. I just kind of wonder, aren't we a little like 12 towers behind? But nevertheless, better late than ever, I guess. It'll be interesting to see what process is there, you know, on these. Do residents actually are even told? Are they given a letter by the G&E? Hey, you know, we're putting up a tower, you know, at the end of your driveway on that light pole. You know, are you okay with that? Or we don't even have to tell you. Who cares? You know what you think. Interesting. I appreciate these meetings because I learn something new every one of them. But anyways, yeah, I think it does beg the question that we need a process and we need rules on these things, especially as they're getting more prolific. We need to, you know, do what we're supposed to be doing here, which is looking out for the citizens. Thank you.
Is it okay if I continue the slides? Because I did, the slides were actually on an ordinance as opposed to health impacts. No, I guess not.
Councillor Bacon, we can't hear you. We cannot hear you.
Sorry, I turned my microphone off for a minute. Thank you. Kirsten, can you still access the screen, or maybe Jeffrey needs to allow you to share it again?
Yeah, I can, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so just to be clear, I actually believe you should put a moratorium on putting up any other antenna, like small cell antennas, because you don't have an ordinance. And the whole idea that the FCC allows people to put them up is predicated on the idea that the FCC has exposure guidelines that are supposed to be okay for people to use. However, there were two court decisions that they're not. The one court decision on health impacts, that court decision, there was a unanimous agreement among all the judges that the FCC's exposure guidelines were arbitrary and capricious according to the words that they used, arbitrary and capricious. And they specifically talked about the exposures causing neurological impacts and the reproductive impacts. And each of those two impacts, the research on them, there's hundreds and thousands of studies that show harm. And on cancer, there's more, but they chose to not include cancer as a lawyer explained, because they were hoping to get unanimous agreement, and they had a holdout. And the holdout agreed to go along if they left out cancer. Now, I don't know the reason, but that was in the DC Circuit of Appeals. So these are people who are intelligent, they know what they're doing, and they believe the FCC had to go back and change their exposure guidelines. So if the whole basis of putting in towers is that the FCC has these exposure guidelines that protect us, is completely is predicated on the wrong idea, then that's the reason the people were asking for the moratorium. And there are places where they have put moratoriums. And the other thing you have to keep in mind is that the small cell antennas that they put up are the antennas that go on a large tower, and they can be directly outside your bedroom if they're on the light pole, or if they're on the utility pole, they can be directly by your house. And what everyone's reporting is they become ill. So 2 doors down in September, there was an antenna that was put on the light pole by my house. And I had no idea, but I can tell you that I just kept coming down ill. I had the flu. I felt awful. And then I eventually called HG&E because after, I don't know, maybe in 2023, after a couple of the months, I was outside and I realized that behind the trees that there was this extra antenna, and I called HG&E, and then I don't know the reason, but the antenna is gone, and I feel like my health has improved. So I think it would be really smart for Holyoke to put a moratorium, at least until they have an ordinance. So I will just continue. I will give you a copy of this so that you can look at it, but also I don't really appreciate the idea of handing it to Verizon, but I think it's a public hearing. I don't think you can really tell them no, but that's just the way I am. So the other thing is that there's a former of the lawyer from the FCC who just published an article talking about how the environmental procedures at the FCC are a case study of corporate capture, that they're completely ignoring all the laws around protecting the environment. And so I have that in this, so you can check it if you're interested. And the other problem that we have in the US is that the state legislatures are also often influenced by all the cash that these telecommunications companies have, and about 30 states have stripped the authority of the local governments to control the placement of these antennas. And in our state, there is a currently proposed law to streamline antennas that was sponsored by some legislators that are very close to us, Senator Adam Gomez and Representative Angela Pupolo. They're in the Western Massachusetts area, so if you know them, I would talk to them and tell them it's a terrible idea. And then, of course, there's always some legislation that increases the need for antennas. So if we have autonomous cars, that's the reason these antennas are going up. We do not need autonomous cars. If we put them in, we will need antennas on every street pole. So the other issue that we have is that our permits, we have towers that were put in 1996 or earlier, and the permits for those aren't that strong. So there are a few things we can do in the permits, is that in the permits we need to build allowances for change. But also we should be contacting the federal and state legislators, providing education and pressure. And if you go to lasttreelaws.com, there are a few current bills. Because I became ill in September through 2023, I was pretty much out. I had actually asked our Holyoke legislator in the past to put forward some legislation, but I was just feeling too badly to ask her to put it forward again, but there are a few that were put forward. I am trying to do a ballot question, so I would love people to apply to help. So in terms of an ordinance, there are a couple
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I have a point of order. One of our members who's here she's ill, but she signed in so she could be here, and she needs to sign off.
Okay.
And when she signs off, we won't have a quorum.
Okay.
And we were talking with Jane about this before we arrived, about what we can do without a quorum. And legal is not sure at this point whether we're even able to vote as a planning board to open or close without a quorum. So because Rosanna is not well, as you could hear, we need, my understanding, and maybe Sharon can, maybe we can get input from Sharon or Jane, but
No, I hear
we
you,
may
but-
need to close and leave.
Oh,
And not
okay,
take up
'cause-
the other things because
Okay.
we don't have enough
So-
people.
So, Kirsten, we don't want to cut you off, but what we would like to do is accept your presentation here into the record in full, even though you haven't had a chance to go through each item on it.
We're going to have to continue this anyway. So.
And we will be continuing it, so there will be opportunity, and we will be inviting in the Board of Health to, and asking them to take a look at and consider the information you're putting forth as well. So.
Oh, okay.
If you can deal with the logistics and the personal situations that we have going on, because we have 2 more public hearings, which we may not even be able to do tonight. But we do appreciate the information that you've brought to us, and if you send it over to Jeffrey, it will be part of the official record tonight, so it won't be lost. Okay?
Okay, so are they going to begin to prepare an ordinance? Because I have information to provide for an ordinance, but I don't know if Aaron Vega is going to be trying to do that, or...
You can submit proposed language as part of your proposal tonight through your testimony in the public hearing. You have referenced certain ordinance language that you wish to present to the public hearing, which you can do. And Jeffrey, whatever Kirsten sends over to you, you have his contact information, Kirsten?
No, I don't, but is it online?
Yes. Yeah, under the
Yeah,
city
if you go to the
council.
city council page and go to staff, you'll find my contact info.
Right, right, oh, okay,
Yes.
great.
Yes, so if
Okay,
you send that
all right
over
then.
to him, we'll consider it accepted in the public hearing. And we will be, we'll be setting the date for that momentarily, so that you'll be able to attend also if you wish. So I was
Okay, great.
I was wondering if we could consider continuing to June, but I am
I
not-
think we just need to, can I get clarification, Sharon? I think we need to open each of these remaining things and continue them to a date certain, unless Sharon has some other information.
which is fine, but we just want to pick a date for this
Okay.
one.
This one seems like we should continue it to whenever we can get the Board of Health here. So maybe to continue it to your next meeting time and we can meet jointly about it. Is that fair?
So, our next meeting would be May 23rd, I think I said. So we
I
could
think that
do
works
that,
for us.
and Jeffrey, if you could invite the the Board of Health and or the Director of the Board of Health. And we always have somebody here from the Law Department, so I'm not concerned about that.
I'll make sure Sean is informed.
Thank you. And so let us then, I'll entertain a motion to continue this public hearing to May 23rd.
So a motion to continue the public hearing for item 6 till May 23rd at 6:30 p.m.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
On the planning board side, can I have a motion to continue our public hearing on the zoning text change for wireless to May 23rd, to a joint public hearing on May 23rd?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
By roll call vote, Nathan?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Lauren?
Yes.
And Rosanna?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, hang in there, Rosanna. 2 more quick things for,
Yeah, so if we can just maybe open the other 2 and continue them. and then.
We'll do whatever you
Yeah,
want.
I'm so
relative-
sorry, we
No, that's
we
okay.
can't
I mean,
keep a quorum here.
Things happen. And,
Motion to open the public hearing for item 3.
and why don't we take them up together, 3 and
Sure.
4?
And continue until May 23rd
Yes.
at 6:30 p.m.
So motion to take up items 3 and 4 and continue to May 26th. Is that
So
what
I
it
think
was?
officially we need to
23rd,
open
sorry.
them.
We can't open them together?
Yes,
Yes,
we
but-
can, but I think we need to open them
And then continue.
first.
And then we'll open
That's why I
them,
said
and then you'll
motion to
continue them,
open
and
the
then we'll
public hearing.
continue.
It has to be
Yep.
two different.
Okay. And then we have to do the other thing just
Oh,
separately. That's all.
got it.
Yeah, you're just
Second,
ahead of
third.
us.
So motion to open up item 3, public hearing for item 3 and 4.
And there's a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 3, order that the zoning ordinance be amended to add a section for short-term rentals in addition to amending section 2 definitions and any other sections that may apply to this use. Item 4, order that the zoning ordinance section 6.4.2 exemptions be amended to add a letter K. Banners or signs associated with a civic or municipal program may be allowed in all districts. Community or commercial sponsorship may be displayed on said banner or sign, provided that the banner or sign itself is not greater than 6 square feet. These installations must be approved by the city and by the Department of Public Works. So we've been asked, because we're losing a quorum on the planning board, to continue these. So I'd like to entertain a motion to continue both of these public hearings to May 23rd at 6:30.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'm not hearing any no's from Jourdain and Rivera, so we're 5 yes?
You are.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and on the planning board, Sharon, do I need to open them separately, or can I open them together?
I'm
You know-
going to say you can open them together.
Okay. I'd like a motion to open the zoning text change hearing for short-term rentals and the zoning text change hearing for section 6.4.2 exemptions to the banners or signs ordinance.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I need Rosanna to second that.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call vote, Nathan?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Lauren?
Yep.
Rosanna?
Yes, ma'am.
And now can I have a motion to continue these two public hearings to our joint public hearing with the ordinance committee on May 23rd?
So moved. And
Rosanna?
second.
You can't do both, Nathan.
I know. I was just rushing to remind you. Sorry,
Can I second
I
this?
second.
Rosanna.
Yeah, Rosanna. All right, by roll call vote, Rosanna?
Yes, ma'am.
Nathan?
Yes.
Lauren?
Yes.
And Kate?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, everybody.
Okay, feel better, and we'll see you in May.
Do we need to make a motion for the planning board to adjourn? Chair of the, nope?
We already did that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And,
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Good night, PB.
Good night. Thanks.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, yes. You too. Okay, I will entertain.
Motion to take up item 11?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item 11, ordered that the city examine and study the Schedule A increases that were recommended by the salary study completed in 2014 so that we can implement salary adjustments that are competitive and more aligned with the neighboring municipalities in order to I think it means attract, and retain city employees. I would just note that the salaries that we're talking about were approved in 2021, so we would be looking at those. So, Counselor Murphy-Ramboletti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, everyone. This order I filed really just to kind of get the conversation started and going here. As you mentioned, this was passed 2 years ago in 2021. But the data was from the compensation study, as many know, that was from 2014. And the study itself was presented to the city council in 2015. And even though we as a body were able to pass this 2 years ago, that was, 6 years later following the study. So those salaries are, a little bit outdated again. And so the purpose for filing this was so that we could have a conversation about what is needed in order to, review these salaries and make them competitive. And just looking at what other municipalities are doing as well. And so I know that Kelly Curran is on the call today. One thing I'll just say before allowing Kelly to speak would be my order specifically says Schedule A. But since I filed this order back in whenever, I think it was earlier, the end of the summer. But since then, realizing that schedules B and C also technically go along with that and fall under ordinance. So I'm not sure if it would require me like amending this order or not, but I just think it's something that we should also try to consider is schedules B and C, even if that means something else needs to be filed. So those are just my thoughts. That's my motivation behind filing this, and I appreciate taking it up.
Thank you. And to clarify, when the ordinance was passed in 2021, the salary scales were updated by Attorney Dupre at the time. So we were not using the old data at that time. So what we can take up in this order is really only Schedule A. We'll need a separate order to address items under other schedules just because of open meeting law. So, and we can definitely consider them, but we will have to consider them separately. So I just want to note that this afternoon we did receive some information relative to Schedule A, but not the full schedule. And Jeffrey, if I can ask you to send the full schedule for Schedule A of the current salaries and scales to the full committee for consideration at our next meeting, that would be great. We do have before us, I believe, the information that was included. Do you folks have anything on item 11 in your packet?
Yes, just the table of the salaries.
Okay. So Kelly, do you want to be the one that runs through this? Or is
Yeah,
there
I don't-
somebody else?
No, I don't mind running through it. Attorney Degnan is also on the line. But as you said, the full schedule is not there. It's only missing the library. We had to do a little deeper digging for some of that information. Not all the municipalities call certain positions the same as we call them. A lot of our titles are outdated, so we're still working on updating that list.
Okay.
But I also wanted to take this opportunity to ask, when we're, looking at these, what other kind of data the council's looking for, so that you have all the information you need to make a decision on moving forward. Because as Tessa said, the salaries are pretty outdated now, and the candidates and just sorry, I hear my kids coming up the stairs, it's distracting me. Other municipalities are actively poaching professionals that mostly fall under the Schedule A, and they are offering a lot more money. A lot of our department heads that fall under Schedule A are very loyal to Holyoke, but that only lasts so long when we have challenging jobs and, monies being offered that could be life-changing for some people. So we'd really like to reevaluate all the salaries in Schedule A so that we could retain the amazing folks that we have now, because I think we're moving in a great direction and I don't want to lose momentum.
So, not speaking for the full committee, and certainly I'll give, leeway to them. The information that I think would be most helpful, looking at this grid that you gave us for tonight, it looks to me like you gave us current salaries, is that right?
Yes.
So I think it would be most helpful, along with the current salaries, to have the range for the position, so what is available.
Okay.
And also, to the extent that you can, because we're looking at total costs and we're looking at people who are having a more difficult time meeting their tax burdens here in the city, to look at the benefit costs. So in my past life, when we were looking at budget costs for positions, we looked at the salary cost and the benefit costs in terms of costing out the jobs, and to see how we are comparing in that regard as well, in terms of hours of work and time off and things like that that are a cost to our citizens also, to support our city government. So there may be other members of the committee who are seeking other specific information. I'm looking to see if there's any hands. I'm trying to double check because we have a lot of people showing on the screen here. So I want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. If I am missing anybody and you wish to speak, I see Councilor Jourdain.
Well, I'll just add for openers, there's an interesting discussion here to be had about the timeliness of pay raises, for sure. I just continue to marvel the tone deafness of City Hall in the midst of inflation, in the midst of the rising cost of people to live in this community. I just marvel that City Hall, this group continues to seek more and more and more money, and more vacation, and more personal days off. The disconnect between the average citizen and its government is just mind-numbing to me, and I continue to marvel at that. Need to be competitive. I hope we're going to measure all the competitiveness. How competitive are we financial health to Westfield? How financially, like, what's their excess levy capacity compared to ours? What's their budget look like compared to ours? I mean, people think that some folks apparently think they work for the town of Lime Meadow, or they think they're working for some affluent community. I mean, this is what people signed up for, you know? I'm not convinced there's unparalleled competitiveness, and we may not be able to compete against every single community because we're not every single community. Our residents don't have perhaps the capacity to pay the type of taxes that Long Meadow pays. I know there was a time when we lost a building commissioner to Long Meadow. I'm not going to double the taxes of the residents of the city so that I can compete with the building commissioner's salary of Long Meadow. I just wonder how comprehensive our quote unquote study will be. I just hope all of that is, you know, what's the average pay of a citizen of Holyoke too? Can we put that on the chart and compare that to the average pay of someone living in Westfield? You know, all of this needs to be considered. I'd love to pay people more and more and more. I think what we need to commit to is to be giving reasonable cost of living adjustments. I think that, you know, it might make us popular around City Hall. That, and again, I've already said it, I'm the skunk at the lawn party here. I already made that pretty clear about the vacation time and all this other stuff that we ill could afford. Another $65,000 for that. Now it's another bite. By the way, we've just given some of these positions pay raises, and it appears we're teeing up another set of increases. So I just hope there's a known capacity and ability to actually pay this. And I'd like to see where the affordability is. And quite frankly, at some point, you know, we can do the best we can do. And then if people feel that they can get some amazing salary somewhere else, then they should go take it. Because I'll tell you right now, there's a lot of citizens that I represent, they're thankful they even have a job. And I sometimes wonder about some of the people that seek these pay raises. They don't feel as thankful, let's put it that way. That's certainly not the vibe I'm getting. That's certainly not all, but certainly some. So I'm very concerned about keeping this city affordable for our residents. We're talking about spending a great amount of money on a new school, on all these other things. I want to make sure people get reasonable cost of living adjustments, but, you know, major things where you're saying like Chelsea, do you know what the cost of living is in Chelsea compared to living in the cost of living in Holyoke is? Why is that even on this table? You know, what other than we have a remotely comparable population, what is comparable about Chelsea and Holyoke? Like, how did that even get on the table? I question that. So you look at city solicitor, ours is 94,000, Chelsea's is 136. Oh my God, the city solicitor is radically uncompetitive to the Chelsea solicitor. Well, the cost of living is wildly more in Chelsea than it is. You know, Westfield, 105, Holyoke's 94. Do you know what the budget is in Westfield? They're so much more financially healthy than we are. It's not even close. Not even close. And Springfield's a whole nother cup of tea altogether. You have nowhere near the responsibilities that the city of Springfield has. So, you know, I marvel at some of these comparisons, but nevertheless, we'll go through this, and I already know how this will turn out. Everybody's underpaid, give everybody pay raises, and we'll probably have another 9-4 vote, maybe 8-4. And this will all pass, and that's where this will go. And, you know, Kevin will be the meanie because he's against all these big increases. But that's okay. I'm just pointing out that we have bills to pay and we have a budget to balance, and the average citizen's taxes keep going up and up and up. And I want to make sure people are being paid a fair salary and a reasonable, but some of these type of adjustments on some of this, I just hope we consider all the factors. What Holyoke can afford, what are our citizens paying for taxes? We have the highest residential tax burden in Massachusetts. We have the highest commercial tax rate in Massachusetts, or amongst them. All these things are variables, okay? So it just seems like it's waves of the ocean with more and more and more and more of all of this. And here we go again. So that's my opening thoughts. I'm sure as we get into this deeper, the timing of all of this is not lost on me, and I'm sure, you know, everybody wants to do the right thing. I want to do the right thing, but you know, there's a cost associated with all of this too. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will actually be brief. I just, you know, because I'm the maker of the order and I'm hearing, you know, some thoughts about the timing of my order. Just for the record, I actually filed this order back in August, so I don't know exactly what the timing is that folks are pointing out here. But, you know, I will reiterate that costs are going up, I agree. And many of our city employees are also city residents. And so as costs go up, I think it's important that our salaries continue to match what is in existence right now. And, you know, a lot of our citizens talk to me about quality of life issues and the services and the quality of services that they are provided. And as someone who actually worked at City Hall for 5 years, and the turnover that I saw during that short period of time, the turnover is actually costing us more than what these adjustments would be, because every time you lose a city employee, because it's not just comparing it to the city of Chelsea, it's comparing it to East Hampton and Chicopee and Springfield, who are taking our employees because they can pay better. And what ends up happening is that we train our city employees, we spend time and money and effort on getting them qualified for these jobs that then they get taken from to other municipalities who get to benefit from the money that we put into them, that we put into training them. So, you know, I think that what I'm doing is trying to start the conversation. I'm not expecting this to go through anytime soon. I am realistic about how long it takes to make any kind of change in government. So to say that the timing is unique, this is actually just on brand with everything that I've been talking about for the last 2 years. So for what it's worth, I think that the impact of turnover and what happens when we don't pay our employees well and when we're not competitive has an impact on city residents, on city taxpayers. And so yes, we do have to spend money in order to make quality improvements for our residents so that it is a place that people want to continue living in. So I don't regret filing this order. I don't have ulterior motives. I just want this city to be a great place to work because that's exactly what our city needs and that's exactly what residents deserve. So thank you very much for your time. That's all I'm going to say this evening.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands at this time, so if.
I put my hand up, Madam Chair.
Oh, okay, I thought it was still up. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Counselor Jourdain, but.
Recording in progress.
Counselor Jourdain, just give me 5 seconds.
Sure, take your time.
I just want to be sure that the folks who are looking for the adjustments on here are just clear on the information that we're seeking to be looking at. And I just want to make sure if they have any questions before we continue this, that they let us know. Okay, so Counselor Jourdain, you have the floor.
Yep. Just in fairness, on the timing point, yes, I think the maker makes a good point about it took 6 months to get this in for, you know.
I have a 10/4/22 date on the agenda, just to be precise.
Yeah, so whatever that is, I think that's about approximately 6 months. So yes, but I'm talking about just overall, the last year of this, you know, this council has been exceptionally generous to the Schedule A employees, especially over the last 2 years in particular. And now over the last year, and this is just another round of this. So I hearken my comments back 6 months. Now, intervening to that was this additional up to 2 weeks vacation, the additional personal time. We already know that debate. We already had that one. The point I also want to make harkens back to the earlier discussion about, you know, this notion about the performance appraisals. You know, when we say, oh, everybody's doing a fantastic job and everybody's wonderful, based on what? Based on what? There is no objective standard here. In the real world, where you actually have performance appraisals, where you actually have objective standards, there's a measure of people actually meeting benchmarks and meeting expectations that reward people for salary. Here, it's who you know, do you get a raise? Maybe you get a raise. If you're not in with the powers that be, you don't get raises. I know people that have done great work here and have gone exceptional long periods of time who didn't because they weren't in the power structure of whoever the mayor at the time was. And other people just seem like they come in and there's a salary range of, I don't know, 28,000 to 42,000. Boom, they come right in at the top salary because they're apparently important. And then you eventually get to the second year or the third year. Well, where's my pay raise? Well, they already put you at the top salary. You know, it's like, give me a break. And then I need another raise. So, you know, it's very arbitrary. There's no rhyme or reason that half the time that goes to how City Hall hands out and doles out raises around here. If anybody thinks there's some scientific method here, doesn't exist. A lot of this is based on total arbitrariness and periodic review. We need an evaluation system. That would be a nice encouragement to say that there's some objective standard that says this one's doing great, and then this one over here, you know what? You're not doing great. You shouldn't be getting anything. Matter of fact, if you had enough write-ups, maybe you shouldn't even be working here. How about that? And then as far as this notion, I keep hearing this about the constant turnover. I'd like us to collect on these positions how much actual turnover there really has been in all of these positions over the time. Not because of political appointment either, right? I mean, city solicitors come and go, not because of grander opportunities. I'll give you that, for example. That's usually because new mayor comes in and handpicks their people. There's a lot that goes with that. Absolutely, a number of these positions compared to some other positions, I would agree, could be warranting more money. But on the other hand, when you consider all of the generous, exceptionally generous, which I have ad nauseum pointed out at other meetings about the massive number of holidays, the massive amount of sick time, the massive amount of vacation time, the massive amount of personal time compared to the private sector. And then in private sector, you're working 60-hour work weeks, and here you're doing 35-hour work weeks. All of that combined, I think employees weigh this. And by the way, these are free choices when people come to work here. Like, you know the deal when you come here, right? So my question is, I mean, I don't think we're drafting anybody into these positions. I believe you're coming here of your own free will. So consider all of that. When you're taking to say, you know, I need more. I need a $20,000 raise or I'm leaving, you know. This is a city that doesn't have it right now, okay? And some of the people in some of these positions need to exert leadership to know that, you know, we can afford cost of living adjustments and we should do that. But this city also cannot afford, in a number of areas, not just these employees, lots of other positions around. We need a lot of belt tightening. So I'm not just saying this about the Schedule A employees, it's all the way around. Some of these contracts have, we need, you know, challenging decisions that need to be made. So we're gonna have to make some hard choices going forward. But I'm sure we'll do the best we can with it, but it's always a good discussion. Thank you.
Counselor Givner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to reiterate that there's no intention of anything happening very quickly on this. I think this is good information to have before us. I think we've been aware that surrounding municipalities have better pay and are poaching some of our employees. I think it's important to continue to keep in mind that you have to spend money to save money. And I don't think it's a good use of our funds to train people so that they can get poached for 30 grand extra in a neighboring city. I think when we gave the vacation time. You know, I think that was a really great thing that we did for the city employees that were able to take advantage of that. I think it's a step in the right direction. I don't think anybody thinks that all of a sudden we're going to be paying, you know, everybody 150 grand in their various positions, but I think it is important to keep in mind that it doesn't serve our city to train people and lose them. It also doesn't serve our city to have positions vacant for extended periods of time. You know, I think most of us do get complaints about quality of services in our city, and that absolutely has to do with vacancies in the past and turnover. So as far as the mayor appointed persons that come into offices, that's not everyone that works in city government. I mean, in city hall, those are some specific positions. So I think it's a little unfair to point to those as if those are, you know, those are the turnover that we don't expect, because we do. But it's not like this is happening today or tomorrow. It probably won't even happen in the next year. So I think it is good to keep in mind and keep it at the front of our conversations and in planning, because, you know, no company likes to train people and lose them every 2 years. So I just wanted to add that. I support anything we can do, obviously, that's reasonable. But I think we really need to keep in mind that it behooves us to keep our employees whenever we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Rivera.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'd like to reiterate too that for us, the most important part is when we're investing in our employees and investing in our staff, that we're able to kind of like keep the staff that we're investing in, because in the long run, that investment will pay off more for us versus another community or another place. But I hear the other arguments with regard to tightening the belt, but I guess for me though, it kind of sucks though to say that, because ultimately, like, one of the largest employers within the city of Holyoke is the city of Holyoke. So what we're saying is to that a majority of the people that are employed within our city has to tighten their belt, even though they are the taxpayers too as well. So it's like, it's kind of not fair to say that overall, but we do have to stay within the means and within our budget. So it's always going to be a difficult balance, and that's something that we have to juggle as a council, and the mayor has the full responsibility of juggling it. But I think that for us to train people, yeah, it is a decision to work for Holyoke, and the decision to work for Holyoke becomes one of, it's a stepping stone versus a career. What do you want? Someone that wants to work here as a stepping stone, or someone that you want that's going to work here as a career? Yeah, there has to be a balance. We can't afford Long Meadow prices. We can't afford Chelsea prices. We probably can't afford East Hampton or Amherst prices. But at the end of the day, it's about showing value to our employees in ways that we can, right? Maybe we can't give them the raise, but we can give you an extra day, or there's a different benefit. It's about balancing it and trying to achieve what we can, and not always talking about things in a negative way, even though we know that it exists. I think for us, it's trying to find a way to move forward with it and make our employees feel valued. Because I believe, I can tell you this much: I don't think the city employees think highly of the council right now. But that's neither here nor there. But it's just, at the end of the day, what do we want our workforce to look like? Do we want it to be a stepping stone for them, for our employees to go somewhere else, or do we want this to be a career? Some positions it is a stepping stone, but other positions we would hope for them to be a career for someone. But yeah, that's what I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands, and I think folks are understanding the information that we're looking for. So, yeah. So I think for the moment, we'll table this until we get the information, and then we can put it on a future agenda.
All right, motion to table item 11,
Second.
pending additional info.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion on item 12.
Motion to take up item 12.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 12, filed by Counselor Jordan, ordered that ordinance 2-61 be amended as follows. Amend Section B, each member of the city council shall be furnished by the city solicitor's office a copy of every collective bargaining agreement clearly outlining all changes made to the agreement, showing the prior language and the new proposed language, a minimum of 10 days prior to the cost items of said agreement being submitted to the city council for approval. Add Section C, that the city auditor provide the city council an accurate financial impact analysis of any such proposed agreement submitted to the city council for approval, explaining the full cost of the proposed agreement and attesting to the city council if such agreement is projected to be affordable in all fiscal years impacted by the new agreement. Councilor Jordan?
Yes, these things, Madam Chair, are happening informally now, and I want to thank the law department for particularly Russ, who is getting us over the red line now of the agreement, and also thank the auditor for doing her best when we have pay raises, which, by the way, I believe we've at this point gone through and given everybody a pay raise, and I know the council's done that over the last year or two. So these financial analysis are being prepared. There's no actual rule that they do it, and the current ordinance says 2-61 basically says that they'll give us a copy of the contract 10 days before. So I thought it would be wise to actually add that to the ordinance that says that we actually get a financial analysis of the financial impact, i.e., like, for example, we had the patrolman's increase at the last meeting. You know, it's $200,000 a year, right? To just do, I think we did a 2 or 2.5% increase. You know, that's what it costs. But we should have that. Right now, there's not an actual requirement to provide it, but they are providing it. And the red line, you know, they're getting that to us. We have to sometimes remind, but they are getting it to us. And I'd like that to come with the same 10 days. That's the current rule for providing copies to the council of contracts. So I'd like to just take this and add it to the ordinance, an amendment to Section B, and then adding Section C to 2-61 for information to the council, which is what this ordinance is about.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Degnan, if the committee requests legal form for this, based on the way this order is written, would you be able to have that available for our next meeting, May 23rd?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no other questions from committee, I'd entertain a motion to request legal to put this in legal form for May 23rd.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Givner?
Yes.
Maldonado Velez?
Yes.
Rivera? Council Rivera? Jordan?
Yes.
Vacan, yes. So 4-0 will refer to legal.
Yes.
This will remain, thank you. This will be tabled for legal form for May 23rd. Thank you. I'll entertain a motion on item 13.
Motion to take up.
Take it
item
off the
13.
table.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item 13, filed by Jordan and Bacon, that ordinance 2-421 be amended to include all public hearings so that the public has an opportunity to truly participate in their government and to advance transparency. Councilor Jordan, I think there were some specific areas listed rather than having it fully completing, including all public hearings.
Yes, Madam Chair. Interestingly enough, this, if councilors recall, this ordinance 2-421 is relative to all public meetings of multi-member boards and otherwise being held after 5 p.m. So that citizens can participate. You know, there was a time when, you know, people would be having meetings at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, how do citizens really get to really participate in that? Well, we recently had a situation where there was a public hearing, quote unquote, but it was held during the day. And it seems to me that those type of public hearings should actually be at a time when all the rest of our public hearings and things of this nature take place after 5, so that citizens can actually participate if they wish to. So I'd like to add that so that it says all public hearings would occur after 5 p.m. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Other than that, it should be just a couple word add-on to 2-421.
Counselor Maldonado Velez.
Thank you, Councilor Jordan, Councilor Bacon, for putting this order in. I actually want to take it a step, maybe a little step further, just to, because I know we are sort of our culture is to have after 5, those people that typically work 9 to 5, but there are people that work at night. There's second, third shifts as well. So I'm wondering if we can add something along the lines to sort of give an additional way for people to present in a public hearing, whether they should email the chair, should they reach out, like some sort of other avenue as well. Because again, yes, I agree, like after 5, but the reality is if we want to make sure that it's participating government to advance transparency to all, then I think having an additional for those that can't make it after 5 for whatever reason, maybe they have kids, they can't leave the meeting. So I don't know what that would look like, but having that language written in there as well, I think I'd be on board with.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Madam Chair.
Counselor Jordan.
Yeah, if Councilor Maldonado Velez wants to come up with some wording on that, I think that's a fantastic idea. Yeah, we want participation from everybody. We want the citizens to be heard. Let's add a sentence or two in there about that. We might also want to consider about requirements about these meetings that are occurring being videotaped and being available for people to actually watch at different hours. Maybe, you know, we certainly want to encourage, which is what the after 5 rule does, you know, to encourage the maximum sort of live participation. But to the extent we can have remote access and at a minimum recording of a lot of these public meetings, and then giving people an opportunity to, maybe we put something that people who are the chairs of various meetings, be it the mayor or a multi-member board, you know, that we need to have their email addresses available with something on the website that says, you know, I can't make this meeting, but I would like my comments shared and provided to the members. I think that's a great idea.
Thank you. So, Counselor Maldonado Velez, if I was understanding you correctly, would it be fair to say that something to the effect of email comments may be accepted in the public hearing if attendance is not possible?
If attendance is not possible. And I think just making sure, just to be clear, is like what email is being sent to. So I think following what Councilor Jordan just said, either like the chairs must be providing emails or whatever we decide.
Okay. So Attorney Dagnan, relative to this one, if we're including all public hearings and then the concept of an email to a designated person or to the designated chair of the hearing, to be acceptable as entered into the public hearing? It's kind of like how we do in city council, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask that. Yeah, it sounds like we do at city council.
Mm-hmm. So
That's what you're,
yeah.
that's what you're looking for? Okay.
Well, actually, what I'm actually looking for is a requirement that if a public hearing is being held, that the chair or whoever's putting the agenda together also includes in the agenda, hey, this is another way to get your voice heard by sending this email, and it'll be entered into the public record.
Right.
So
I
guess-
understand.
Okay, okay. Now, how does your timing look for something like this, Attorney Degnan?
Yeah, we got a few things on May 23rd, so.
I hear you. That's why I'm
put it out
checking.
to the next one.
How about if we say, hang on,
For June?
I know, I'm just looking for the exact date. So if we say June 27th, does that work?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to entertain a motion to table for legal form to June 27th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Oh,
And
Council
to
Givner?
refer it to legal for that draft though, right, Madam
For
Chair?
legal
Not
form.
just- Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think that's what I said.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Counselor Givner?
Yes.
Counselor Maldonado Velez?
Yes.
Counselor Jordan?
Yes.
Counselor Rivera? Counselor Bacon, yes, so 4-0.
Yes.
Oh, 5-0.
Boy, you gotta give me a second, man. You're moving too fast.
So this was referred to legal, and we'll put it on the June 27th agenda. Okay, motion to take up item 14.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Filed by Counselor Puello, Schedule 86-321, parking, remove both, oh, wait a minute. We got an update on this.
Yes.
I got an email late on this. Bless you. Come on. I know it was basically remove two things. Hang on, salary, that's something else. It was an update from Will and the engineer.
Madam Chair?
Yes? Oh,
Hey.
Counselor Puello.
Thanks, Matt.
I started to read the order.
Should we take?
Um,
Do you want to take them all up together?
oh, yes, sure.
So, motion to take up item 14, 15, and 16 together as a package.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so item 14 is section 86-321, parking, remove both of the entries at South Summer Street, Westerly A and Westerly 78 feet and 96 feet. Item 15, that the following entry be added for Schedule 4, stop streets. And this is street stopped at Vernon Street, direction of travel southerly, intersection Main Street. And item 16, that a handicap sign be placed in front of 400 Maple Street for Elliott Sierra. Counselor Puello, I know I received an email from Jeffrey that I'm just trying to pull up, that there was an update to this one late this afternoon.
Yeah, that's right, Madam Chair. Thank you. So the city engineer, he spoke with Don Welch, and I did as well, and I'm really thankful for them helping us on this. They were just both signing off on their recommendations to hopefully get these two spots cleared up for folks down on South Summer Street. That's really all the email said. If I'm wrong, Jeffrey can correct me. I was going to request to see if maybe the committee could table 15. I know Councilor Jordan and I, we've been spoken. I know he's got some stuff from constituents down there, so we're going to see if we can work on the light at that intersection.
Oh.
Instead of turning it into a stop like Chris suggested.
Oh, okay. Okay, so on item 14, it was to remove two signs, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, and so you would like us to adopt that order to remove the signs?
Please.
Okay. And so does somebody want to give me a motion on that?
So, motion that item 14
Be adopted.
Is adopted. Sorry, I'm like complied with in my mind. What's the
Okay.
word?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Counselor Givner?
Yes.
Counselor Maldonado Velez?
Yes.
Counselor Jordan?
Yes.
Counselor Rivera?
Yes.
And Bacon, yes. So those will be adopted to be removed according to the email if it differs from this piece of paper I'm looking at. For item 15, I'll entertain a motion to table. Counselor Puello, you want this tabled in case you end up needing it?
Right. I don't know if Councilor Jordan wants to talk. I know I appreciate him helping me out. So Councilor Bartley and I were working on this light down at this intersection. I know the city engineer kind of gave us a backstory on it, and we're going to see if Councilor Jordan can work some magic and see if maybe we can do something else with it. But if we could table it now so we don't change it, and then explore this other thing here, that'd be great.
Okay, all right.
Motion to table item 15.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Givner, Maldonado Velez?
Yes.
Rivera and Jordan?
Yes.
And Bacon, yes. So that'll remain tabled until we hear from the maker, if you want it back, okay?
Thank you.
Okay. And on the handicap sign, we have, I believe, a recommendation from our Disabilities Commission.
To do it, it's a motion that the order be
Approved. Right.
Yeah, we do.
I'm just looking, usually Don signs off on.
Madam Chair,
Jeffrey, yes?
I communicated with Don, and he did approve it through email. He just hasn't had a chance to physically sign it.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for clarifying that. So I'll entertain a motion.
So can we get a motion to approve, also for the next meeting, making sure Don gets us the signed paperwork by the next meeting?
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Counselor Givner?
Yes.
Counselor Maldonado Velez?
Yes.
Counselor Jordan?
Yes.
Counselor Rivera?
Yes.
And Counselor Bacon, yes. So that passes 5-0 to recommend to add the handicap sign.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Right.
Have a good night. Take care.
You too.